Hello
Okay,
and welcome.
welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. We've got anti-war mindset here today with us. We're going to be debunking vegan lies, debunking and exposing, like we always do. I do want to let me show your channel real quick. This
Yes,
is your
thank you.
channel. I want to encourage anyone watching to go and subscribe. Anti-war mindset has really picked up the baton here and has been doing lots of wonderful and great research behind the scenes, and he's already got a bunch of videos here where he's debunked a lot of the same vegans that I've debunked. However, he's really expanded his research. He's found some studies and some information that was new to me. So I've been pointing people your direction for at least a couple months now. This is our
Thank you.
first live stream together, um, first of many, hopefully. And
Yes.
I wanted to kind of ask you before we get started. Um, do you mind telling us how it was that you became interested in debunking the vegan lies?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me, first of all, and for
My pleasure.
promoting my channel. And yeah, sure. There was a time when I almost became a vegan myself because I was influenced by a lot of vegan influencers in Germany. And uh, vegan propaganda in Germany is on the rise, definitely. In Europe in general, probably, and in the world. And yes, I felt bad for the animals, and um, for the animals in factory farms and all of that. And then basically, I told my family, "Hey, I want to try veganism. I want to do this," and they basically talked me out of it, and they said, "This is gonna destroy your health," basically. So what I then did, I further researched this topic, you know, and when I further researched this topic, I basically became more and more interested in nutrition and ecology and how our food system has impact on the animals. Um, and what I then found out was that basically all what vegans are saying are either half truths or propaganda, lies, myths, misdirect, um, and really a reductionist view on how the world actually works and how the food system actually works. Um, and yeah, but first I fell for the emotional manipulation, you know, and then I realized, oh, there are actually many animals that die during crop production that I wasn't aware of that really. And this is something that not many people are aware of. And the first video that I kind of found on the subject was from Farming Truth that says more vegans kill more animals than non-vegans or something. Um, and that got me thinking, wow, this is something that not many people explore actually. And then I found Garland Farms channel, and he had this uh, vegan kill cult series and many other vegans. And then I researched further into this, and yeah, this is basically how I got sucked into this whole thing. You know,
How long ago was this when you were considering going vegan?
I would say 5 years ago, probably.
And these were people in your family that were warning you of the health consequences?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Had are these family members of yours that warned you, do they have any kind of experience with veganism, or do they have some type of expertise in human nutrition?
Not in particular, but um, My family is kind of from a very rural background, and
Mhm.
for example, my grandparents, they have chickens, and I sometimes get backyard eggs from there, grass raised or pasture raised.
Mhm.
Um, and they're living a very traditional lifestyle, and they basically told me that you're it's going to be a risk, and they know some people that have tried this and their health fell apart, real life
Mhm.
experience basically, and what people can see when they actually have when they actually open their eyes and see reality. But yeah, basically, the thing is, you don't need to have a PhD in nutrition to see that veganism is probably not the healthiest way to live. I mean, just look at vegans themselves, actually, you know. But
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, Now, anti-war mindset has got a string of studies and other things that he wants to show us today. Before we get started on that, do you want to kind of break the ice, possibly by watching uh, one of your videos that you've got here? Um,
sure, sure.
Maybe, see, you've had some really find a good crop deaths. Most of them are crop deaths, aren't they?
Well, yeah, I heavily focus on that because I think this is under talked about in the so-called anti-vegan or carnivore community, unfortunately. I think this should be much more emphasized, and sustainability and environment aspect of veganism in general more. I think that I mean, health is very important, don't get me wrong. And a lot of carnivore influences focus on health. And I think that's great, but they
Yeah,
also should focus on this aspect because vegans are saying, oh, you're doing something unethical to the animals. That's a very big claim, right? You're doing something horrible, is what they actually claim. You're committing genocide to these animals, you're enslaving these animals. And, when I see animals that are mistreated, I feel bad, and other people feel the same, right?
hmm,
Meat eaters are not monsters who just are apathetic when they see animals suffering. This is very clear. So uh, this is why we need to address this. Whether or not what the vegans are saying is actually correct about that, or is it maybe is there maybe another layer that they're not telling us,
yeah,
and there actually is.
yeah, absolutely. At least one layer, if not a million. Uh, yeah, if you watch, there's, have you heard of persistence hunting before? Um, from what I
Uh,
understand, it's the oldest known method of hunting carried out by humans. We're basically built for running long distances, human beings. Um, and so there are tribes today that are still practicing this hunting technique where they chase down an animal. They work as a team and they chase down the animal for as long as it takes to get it, to finally be exhausted for an easy kill. And I've seen the kill process with these tribesmen. I've killed animals myself for food. It's not something that really anyone takes lightly.
mhm.
Killing an animal for food is not the same thing as some type of mentally ill, sadistic individual that would torture an animal to death. That
Yeah.
and getting some type of jolly from that. That is not what people behave like when they're killing an animal for food. It's a very somber act and usually done with very great respect for the and thanks for the animal and the sacrifice that it's making for our own nutritional sustenance. And that's why one of the reasons why uh, probably like you recognize that um, you know this crop deaths issue is the Achilles heel of veganism, because they're constantly putting this cruelty free label on everything and showing people this animal torture porn and saying, if you don't have to eat animals, then why would you support the system that's killing these animals? Animals do not have to die for your food. And this is just a giant lie that veganism
Yes.
tells. And I recognize that. You recognize that. It seems to me that if any vegan that professes to be sincere in their love for animals would put their nose to the grindstone and learn everything that they can about crop deaths so that they could get their heads wrapped around the quadrillions of animals that die and suffer every year as a result of the factory crop farms that bring the items on the vegan menu to market.
Exactly. And vegans have backtracked a little bit, and they have recognized, oh shit, there's this crop deaths issue, and now they're doing damage control. This is all we are seeing in the past months and years and weeks from vegans is damage control, because they have brought up some responses to what you just said, to the crop deaths argument. But their responses are bullshit. And we will shred today and in the future and in many videos, we will just shred these responses. And one of the responses is um, that as a percentage, the human edible animal feed that we give those animals exceeds the human food crops or anything like that, or it takes more to feed a cow than to feed a human. It takes more human edible uh, grain, for example, because most of the uh, food that is human edible that we give to the animals as animal feed is in fact grain. And they say, oh, this is a this is something that is inefficient because we could have all these calories, you know, and but we're wasting that on the animals. I have some slides prepared for that, and this is such a nonsensical argument. And Debug Your Brain recently made some videos about that, and they're invoking all kinds of nonsense in order to make it seem like this is a good argument, but it's actually not.
Yeah, no, it's not. So do you want to watch this? Most crops are fed to livestock, though fully debunked. We'll watch that
Yeah,
together.
sure, sure.
And if you have anything that you want to expand on or stop and talk about it, just let me know. I'll pause it and you can expand. So let's see what we can do here.
Okay, the crops grown and harvested for. Okay, so today I will once and for all debunk this vegan meme that most crops are grown for animals, for livestock, because vegans will still tell this lie over and over and over again. I constantly see this being repeated ad nauseum that most crops that are grown are for livestock. Okay, this is a total lie. This is a total falsehood, and I will prove it to you. And vegans basically say that because if they're confronted with the fact that their diet causes immense animal suffering and death, that they will blame that animal suffering and death, they will blame it on meat eaters, because according to the vegans, the livestock production uses more cropland and more crops are being grown for livestock supposedly, so therefore the crop deaths argument is null and void. But unfortunately for the vegans, most crops are grown for human consumption. Okay, and I will prove that to you. And not only that, but also that in a vegan world there would be more crops grown and more uh, cropland being used. Okay, so let's us hear from Joey Carpstrong again this argument, right?
The vast majority of cropland is grown to feed the animals you eat. So
That's a huge lie that
Yes.
Joey just told. But the vegans just drink that Kool-Aid right up without question, don't they?
Yes, and it wasn't actually that easy to find a good source on how much land is actually dedicated to human food crops versus animal feed crops. But eventually, I found actually a source that really illustrates that. You know, with this map,
And it's
but
coming up.
You know,
Yeah. Okay. I get it started again.
any crop death, any pesticide harm, any predator shooting, any of that is magnified by huge amounts when you eat animal products. When you eat a steak, the crop deaths in a steak is magnitudes more. I can't even think of.
Okay, so that's basically the argument, right? So he blames all of the crop deaths on the animal feed. Okay, now where is this meme actually coming from? That most of the crops are grown for animals. Okay, I think actually it comes from Our World and Data. Okay, especially this graph. Now this shows us the global.
Now, I'm going to point out that Our World in Data is basically a Bill Gates slash World Economic Forum publication. Am I right?
Yes, it's also put out by Oxford scientists, and Oxford has a long-standing relationship with Monsanto, with Bayer Monsanto, and this is the vegan go-to source, right? It just
Right.
tells you something about how critically the vegan thinking is actually, and it's
Yeah.
critical
And
thinking is non-existent
not
there.
existent. And that's why you may have noticed what I've noticed is that in many cases, this Bill Gates slash WEF slash Oxford New World Order science publication does actually tell the truth, but it presents it in a way that skews the numbers and tells a lie, right? But if you look behind the curtain, the data that all of these graphs and tables that this publication offers up um, are proven to be misleading because of the way that they present the information and their graphs.
Yeah, yeah, especially with the graph on the screen, because they say that most agricultural land is occupied by livestock or for livestock production, and then in small print that you can barely see, they say, "Oh, this also includes grassland." So of course, this inflates the numbers, right?
Right.
But
Grassland, aka non-arable,
yes,
aka it will not support crops. Right.
exactly, and but what they also do is they cite a lot of Oxford references. So they reference it's an Oxford publication, and they also reference a lot of Oxford research. So they're self-referential in a way, especially when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. They always refer to this Poor and Nemesek paper, which all the vegans use to say that, oh, if we went all vegan, then we would decrease land use by, I think it was 75% or so, which is total nonsense.
Total nonsense.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Land use for food production, and it shows us the agricultural land, right? So it says here 77% for livestock agricultural land and only 23% for crops. Now, this might seem that, oh, the vegans were right. Most of the agricultural land is for the animals. okay, for the livestock. However, it says here in small letters, this includes grazing land for animals. Okay, grazing land. This is a very crucial point because this graph is actually very deceptive because they're including in that agricultural land for livestock the grazing land. And why is this important? Because most agricultural land is actually grazing land or marginal land, okay? And only 33% is arable cropland, okay?
This is a huge, huge point that you've just made. It completely destroys a large portion of the vegan lives. And,
Yes.
I've even had vegans who would claim that there's some type of conspiracy by the livestock industry to label this land as marginal or non-arable and make claims that they could grow vegan staples on a rocky cliff face,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, how can you get up a combine harvester on some hill? I mean, on some rocky hill? Like how does this work, you know? And also not all soil actually uh, offers the right nutrition for all the crops to grow, and the climate is also not something that is equal, and the rainfall, you have to consider rainfall and all kinds of conditions that make it so that you cannot grow crops everywhere. I mean, it's very logical actually.
Mhm. And it's also the powers that be are using these numbers dishonestly. It's a little bit, when they talk about agricultural land, most people think of cropland. They think of, rows and rows of some type of bean or grain or vegetable. They don't think of a rocky mountainside that will not support crops at all. They don't think of that as agricultural land. But two-thirds of the world's agricultural land is not suitable for growing crops. The
Yeah.
best use of it is raising ruminant animals that will feed the soil, encourage vegetation to grow in the area, which decreases erosion, sequesters carbon into the soil. All of the things that we should be trying to do around the world right now is what is that's what wild animals in on these non-arable plots of land were doing before agriculture ever even came along.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, the vegans always say, "Oh, animal agriculture is so inefficient." Actually, it is way more efficient than plant agriculture. It is
And you've got the
super.
studies to prove that today, don't you?
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. All right, let's continue here.
And this marginal land can only be used by livestock. And not only that, but there is barely any pesticides being used on marginal land, on marginal agricultural land, on grazing land, etc. Most of the pesticides and most of the synthetic fertilizers are used on arable land, cultivated cropland. Okay. So this already shows you that our world and data is hugely biased. Okay. Now, when you actually not count in the grazing land, you get a more accurate picture. Okay. When we look at the crops. So here's a map that shows us the crops for food, feed, process, export, and other utilities, right? So, and the green color is food, and the blue color is the animal feed. Okay,
So the green is these are crops that are grown to produce items for the vegan menu, and the blue are crops that are grown specifically to feed livestock. Correct?
Yeah, exactly, 100%.
Yeah.
And as you can see, what Jerry Carbstrong was just saying, oh, the vast majority of land is used for the animal feed crops. Total bullshit, as you can see.
Total. Yeah. Huge lie. Huge vegan lie. And you know when you're dealing with a dishonest vegan when you show them this, but they go back to telling that same lie again and again and again, which to me indicates that we're dealing with, when that happens, we're dealing with a vegan that the concern for the animals is fake,
Yeah,
not sincere.
crops grown and harvested for animal feed. And as you can clearly see in this map, most of the colors that you see on this map is green. That means most of the crops grown and harvested are for food, for human consumption. Okay? If what the vegans were saying was actually true, that most of the crops are grown for livestock, then this map here would be blue mostly, but it isn't. It's mostly green. So this already debunks what the vegans are saying. Um, Again, when we focus on actually uh, crops being grown and not inflate the numbers with pasture land and grazing land being thrown in there, right? Because if we talk about crop deaths, we don't talk about pasture land and grazing land because there is barely any pesticides being used on pasture land and grazing land. There's any barely uh, synthetic fertilizers being used there. Okay. So most of the pesticides are for the crops, okay, for cultivated cropland. Most cultivated cropland is used for human consumption, as this map clearly shows. Okay, you can also see it in this graph here that the harvested hectare of land for human food is double that of animal feed crops. Okay, double.
Okay. I wanted to look at this a little bit closer. So
Yeah,
this up here, this is related to that previous graph that we saw or map.
yeah,
This green line here, these are food crops, and then this blue line here is feed crops. So
yes,
this is a line graph representation of the hectares that were represented on the previous map, correct?
correct. Yeah, pretty much. And
Yeah.
I mean, this is, and harvested hectare of land is the correct metric to use when we talk about crop deaths, because there are also some other metrics and some other graphs there, like calories and all of that, but this is irrelevant. This is totally irrelevant. We're talking about hectares of land being sprayed with pesticides and being harvested and being used for food production that kill animals in the process. So we're not talking about weight or calories. This is total irrelevancy. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. A calorie is a unit measure of heat
Yeah.
and has absolutely nothing to do with human nutrition. In fact, uh, at least here in the United States today, people are getting too many calories right now and not enough of the essential nutrients that are required for, optimal human health.
Yeah. This is also something that I actually wanted to show, or that this is also something I will talk about in the response to debug your brain, because vegans are again saying that the animal agriculture is inefficient because we are losing so many calories that we could consume, so many heat units, so many photons that we are losing, but we're gaining actually vitamin B12, heme, iron, zinc, and all the other nutrients and high quality protein. But
Right.
we're losing the heat units. Oh my God, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. You never hear about, vegans really focusing on the essential and conditionally essential nutrients that are required for optimal human health. They're always talking about these calories because they know that if they move beyond calories, then they've got to explain, how they're going to industrially produce all of the B12 and creatine and vitamin D and all of these nutrients that are completely missing from a vegan diet.
Yes,
And
and also destroys the environmental arguments actually, because those nutrients have to be replaced, and this high quality protein has to be replaced. And in order to replace that, you have to actually grow more food. But we'll get to that later.
right,
We want to talk about that later.
okay,
As you can clearly see, the green color and the blue color. Okay, harvested hectare of land again is the accurate criteria if we are talking about crop deaths. Okay, because these pesticides, they're being sprayed on the harvested hectare of land. Okay, so counting in talking about calories or anything like that, or weight, doesn't make any sense in that regard. And again, most of what the animals eat is actually grass and leaves, as this graph shows. Okay, so and byproducts and crop residues and stuff like that. Okay, and you can clearly see in regards to soybeans, because vegans are obsessed with soybeans and whether or not soybeans are driven by livestock or by oil. To me, this is really irrelevant because, as you can see in this graph, oilseed cakes, meaning soybean meal, for example, is only 5% of what livestock is eating. Okay, can you
So
pause on that real quick?
yeah,
most of what's
Because this video was before I actually found out that the oil was really the driving force behind soybean production, or
right.
where I have like
You have that
100% clarity on that.
correct.
Um, but I even found additional evidence that I want to show today that this is really so.
Okay, great. Yeah, and it really illustrates also the vegan lie, which is also basically the vegan lies have first been formulated by corporations like Bayer, Monsanto, where they will in the World Economic Forum they'll say, well, if just like Earthling Ed says, if you've got a problem with all of the destruction and death caused by the soybean industry, then why would you continue to be a patron to the industry that's consuming up to 80% of all the soybeans that are produced, which is a lie, right? That's one of the half truths that you were talking about earlier, which is they don't tell people that 100% of the soybeans are processed to extract the oil. And by weight, each soybean is about 80% meal, which is inedible for human beings, and 20% oil, which is 100% consumed by human beings, either as cooking oil, processed food ingredient, or raw material to make biodiesel, which is consumed by human beings in the vehicles.
Yes. Yeah, the meal is basically just a byproduct of the oil extraction or process of the crushing. And the crushing is why soybeans are cultivated. And the product of the crushing is the oil and the meal. So we have to figure out which is more profitable. Is it the meal or is it the oil?
Hmm.
And as I will show later, the oil is consistently over years and years priced higher than the meal.
Hmm.
So if 1 unit of oil and 1 unit of meal are both sold, then the oil is going to generate the higher profit margin. And
Hmm.
they're not wasting any oil. They're going to sell that oil. So,
Right. And I have actually discovered that the soybean industry is purposefully misleading people and purposefully misrepresenting the facts in favor of the faulty and lying vegan narrative, because they know that if people realized the truth, that that industry would be in peril, because
oh, wow.
the soybean industry is going to thrive in a vegan mandate, a global vegan mandate. The soybean industry stands to gain trillions and trillions of dollars, and they want a vegan world. I mean, who
Yeah.
wouldn't if, the pharmaceutical and food industries have merged into one entity now? And, you know, they're basically looking to make money, milk us for cash from cradle to grave. And that's why they're the way that they, if I'm sure that you probably learned a lot about the soybean industry by, like me, researching the financials, as far as like the market financials, looking at market industry predictions. It's all about, they're all excited about, if the rise of veganism. And it doesn't matter
Yeah.
whether it's the soybean industry or the fertilizer industry or the toxic agrochemical industry. They're all just sitting on the edge of their seats for the world to become vegan, because they know, along with the drug companies, that they're standing to make a killing,
Yeah,
literally.
exactly. Um, yeah, the whole conflict of interest of veganism is a whole topic in itself. But one thing about the soybeans that go actually into beef, for example, versus into these fake vegan meat, so-called meats, cell cultured
Animals
meat,
eat as
and
grass.
this other plant-based meat, they actually use more soy than, and a university report actually came out, they use more units of soy in those fake meats than in beef. So of
Hmm.
course the vegans are helping the soybean market rise. This is very clear.
Yeah.
And also all the animal fats, all the butter, this has to be replaced, and they're going to replace it with vegetable oil, seed oils, all that nonsense.
Yeah. That's good.
Leaves and stuff that humans cannot eat. Okay, like byproducts from and crop residues, leftovers, waste products. Okay, so yeah, with all this already, with this map and with this graph, it's already debunked this nonsense that most crops are grown for animals. Okay, most crops are.
Do you have a link to this that we can put in the chat so that people can pull this up?
What I just said about the soybean.
Just the sector-based global crop. I can look that up. Sector-based global crop utilization trends.
Oh, sure, sure. I can put it in the links. Wait a second. Okay, I have to put it in a private chat because I have to go on YouTube to put it in the live chat, I guess. And I'm not logged in with YouTube, so.
Okay.
But here's the study. I sent it to you. Then it's in a public chat. You have to scroll down, and then you see all the graphs and all the maps. But I usually put all the links that I show in my videos. I put them in the pinned
In the
comment.
description. Oh,
Yeah, I
pinned
put
comment?
them in pinned comment. Yes,
Okay.
because it's more visible there.
Let's see.
Or is it not there? On
Yeah, I
this
think
video?
this was right before you started doing that.
Ah, okay. Okay. But yeah, I put it in a private chat, so just put it in a regular live chat.
All right, I'm not seeing it. I see a nature.com article. Is that it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I'll put that in the group chat. There's
Are
the
there
Real
any
Tuesday channel.
vegans?
Hello. Go ahead.
Are there any vegans today watching this live stream?
Very likely that there are vegans in the watching. There are some. There's at least a handful that have been assigned to watching Garland Farms and trying to debunk or trolling in the comments. So they're, I really believe that there's some of these vegans, their job description requires keeping an eye on Garland Farms. There's a vegan D in the comments there. All right, you ready to continue here?
Yeah, but you have posted a Nature. Okay, you posted a Nature article. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. We can continue.
Okay.
Are grown for human consumption. It's 100% true, and you have to keep in mind that if we all went vegan, then we would have to replace all these animal food products, okay, this animal nutrition, okay. And what we have to keep in mind is that there's a difference in bioavailability, for example, of vitamins in animal sourced foods or plant-based foods, okay. There's a difference there, okay. Animal foods have better bioavailability than plant-based foods, okay. You can see it in this graph here. The orange color is the animal-based foods and the green color is the plant-based foods. And you can clearly see that in almost every category of vitamin, there is a higher bioavailability in animal-based foods than in plant-based foods. So you have to keep in mind this if you want to talk about a scenario where we replace all the animal-based foods for plant-based foods. So it would mean that we would have to eat more plant-based foods if we want to get the same nutrition that we would otherwise get from animal-based foods, okay? And this is also a conclusion that this study gets to. Nutritional and greenhouse gas impacts of removing animals from US agriculture. And it comes to the conclusion that the food production would increase. Okay, so the crop production would increase if we don't have livestock agriculture in the United States. You can see it in this graph. So there would be more grain produced, for example. Okay, so more crop deaths in the vegan scenario, basically.
So the pie chart on the right is a vegan scenario, and the pie chart on the left is what we've got now.
Yeah, pretty much. And the good thing is they factor in nutrition. So basically, because we are missing all these nutrients in the vegan scenario, we have to produce more food, and that leads to more crop deaths. And this is what the
Mhm.
pie chart on the right side shows. Uh,
So that's
you know,
almost 3 times as much grain crops in a
uh,
vegan scenario.
yeah, pretty much.
So 3 times the amount of grain crops equals 3 times the amount of tillage and erosion and petrochemicals and synthetic fertilizers and mined fertilizers and crop deaths, which are already in the quadrillions per year for
Right,
the crops that produce the items on the vegan menu.
right. I mean, there are some differences in estimation what exactly would increase. Like there are also studies that show that fruits and vegetables would most likely increase, or wheat, or um, rice, for example, soybeans. There are all kinds of estimations, but from the data that I've seen that actually takes into account nutrition properly, yeah, it would pretty much increase overall crop production. And I think this is very also logical. Um, Also, when we get to protein quality, actually, and differences between plant protein and animal protein, which is not the same. So, yeah, I just want to highlight that there's a converging lines of evidence that we have that point to the fact that a vegan world would increase crop deaths. And we can see that also an example that pesticide companies support veganism, and they wouldn't do that if a vegan world would decrease their demand for their products, right? It's very
Exactly.
logical. We can
Exactly.
logically infer that right away. And we have all kinds of studies showing, for example, there's another study that shows that a vegan world, a vegan scenario would increase the percentage of phosphorus burden in the wastewater, right? The contamination. So that means that there would be more phosphate fertilizers being produced. So that means that very likely there's an increase in crop production in a vegan world. We have more, we have market sources that say crop protection is driven by veganism. We have all kinds of different pieces of evidence that point to this conclusion, basically. You know?
Mhm. Okay, you ready to continue the video?
Yeah, sure. Here's more evidence. I've gone through the study in one of my last videos. If we actually compare the micronutrient value of different food items, we can see that the land use is increased for some plant-based food items in comparison to some animal-based food items. Okay, the number one spot here is olive oil. Okay, it's way higher than beef, for example, or palm oil uses more land than cheese and poultry, and uh, and bananas use more land than cow milk, for example, or rice and pulses and apples use more land than more land than eggs. Okay, and tofu uses more land than eggs or liver, beef liver. Okay, and this is also not just true if we equate for micronutrient value, but also for amino acids. Okay, this comes from the study Essential Amino Acids, Master Regulators of Nutrition and Environmental Footprint. Okay, you can see in this graph about land use that uh, if we equate for the essential amino acids, recommended daily allowance, basically the required amount to stay healthy, that we would have to produce way more and use way more land for peas, for example, than for beef, okay? And for many animal products, chickens, pigs, eggs, milk, um, we would have to use more land for beans and peas, okay? Chickpeas. Also, very close to that is rice and potatoes, okay? So we would have to use more land, pretty much.
So this is showing land required.
Yeah, land use of different food items, different food groups. But
And the
level,
red, what's the
the
red, the
red,
yellow, and the green?
uh, this is the red and the yellow is basically for weight in kilogram in grams. So, for example,
Mhm.
if we have like 100 grams of eggs, how much land does this use versus 100 grams of rice,
Why
for
is
example?
the
But
why is the land required for peas so high?
apparently, because this, I mean, this focused on essential amino acids, recommended
Mhm.
daily allowance. So basically, the amount we need to
Okay.
reasonably stay healthy, and this is the kind of amount that we would have to eat and have to use land for if we would
Hmm.
have to meet that threshold in comparison to other food items. And that's
Yeah.
pretty much what the graph shows there. So
Yeah.
not just the crude measurement of what different food items weigh and how much land that uses, but also how much nutrition it actually gives us, and how much therefore we would have to use land for that food item,
Wow.
pretty much.
And when you say nutrition, in this case, we're talking about essential amino acids.
Yeah, yeah,
EAA.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
This is also a similar conclusion that this study comes to carrying capacity of the US agricultural land 10 diet scenario. And again, in the vegan scenario, here is the vegan scenario and here's the baseline scenario. And the brown color says that the brown color illustrates cultivated cropland. Cultivated cropland is the monocropping, the cropland, and that would increase in the vegan scenario compared to the baseline or compared to the omnivore meat heavy scenarios. Okay. And the only land use that would be decreased would be grazing land or perennial cropland, which again has barely any pesticides on it, so barely any crop deaths occur on these types of lands. Okay, so the type of land that would uh, cause the most crop deaths would increase in a vegan scenario. Okay, and most animals on this planet that are actually directly killed by human beings are killed by pesticides. Okay, invertebrates killed by agricultural pesticides greatly exceed all other groups of farmed and wild animals killed by humans. Okay, you can see it in this graph.
Yeah, that's a good graph right there.
Yeah, and this comes from animal charity evaluators. So this is actually a animal rights organization. So this is not some pro meat propaganda, some, you know, this is actually their source pretty much, and it shows the truth actually.
Right. Yeah, here's the farmed vertebrates. So there's all your cattle and sheep and chickens and etc. And then just the invertebrates killed by the agricultural pesticides. And that doesn't count all of the elephants that are killed for crops, or the deer that are killed for crops, or the raccoons that are killed for crops, or the possums that are killed for the crops, or
Yeah.
the field mice and the moles and the voles and the snails and the worms and the, well, I guess the snails and the worms might be included in there, but no vertebrates that are killed by agricultural pesticides or other lethal crop protection measures are included in this graph.
Yeah, yeah. Even this graph actually severely underestimates the amount of crop deaths. Yes. Um, to be fair, we also have to see that some of these invertebrates are also killed for crops that are grown for animals, but this is only a tiny fraction compared to the crops that are grown for the humans, and humans includes vegans. So, and vegans eat more crops than any other group of diet. So,
Yeah, and vegans are not happy just being vegan. They want to force, by violence if necessary, everyone to be a vegan. So this excuse that they try to use that, hey, we're only 1% of the population, is not a truthful argument, because they do want the government to start harming people who do not agree to be a member of the vegan religion.
yeah, exactly. This whole argument about, oh, we are just 1 or 2% of the population is the most low IQ argument that I've ever heard, because you want everyone to be vegan. So why are you saying this?
Yeah, exactly. It's just a technique to distract and to try to hide the truth. That's all it is.
It is a big distinction. Okay. And yes, some of those invertebrates are also killed because of pesticides on animal feed, but this is only a small fraction. The bulk of this massive amounts of animal deaths is on the hands of crop production for human consumption. Okay. And vegans eat more crops and more plant-based foods than any other diet. And again, it would increase in the vegan scenario. Okay. And also the pesticide footprint is substantially higher for plant-based foods than for animal-based foods. Again, you can see it in this graph. There's a huge difference there, with almost 60% of global environmental pesticide footprint burden is on plant-based foods, and only 11% is on animal-based foods. And yes, this also includes animal feed. Okay.
So this again debunks what Joey Carbstrong said earlier, which was that the vast majority of crops are grown to feed livestock, when you've just shown again and again and again, this one here is pointing specifically at the pesticide footprints of animal-based food versus plant-based food. And the plant-based food is obviously consuming a whole lot more pesticide. It has a much larger pesticide footprint.
Yeah. I mean, vegans really hate this graph because it just destroys. I mean, this graph alone actually settles the case, to be honest, because who has more plant-based foods in their diet? It's vegans. And animal-based foods contribute only 11% to the global pesticide footprint burden, even including animal feed crops such as soybean meal and grain and all of that, right?
Right.
And this already destroys, because the people that have the higher pesticide footprint are killing more animals, because pesticides kill actually the most animals on this planet in the form of insects, but also in other animal forms. So vegans logically kill more animals than any other group. It's pretty logical, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard to get vegans to face this fact. Like, I was trying to teach this to the guy that calls himself reasonable vegan. And you ask him, hey, is honey vegan? And he'll say, absolutely not. It's not vegan because you're taking advantage of these honeybees. And then you turn around and say, well, what about the honeybees and the rest of these invertebrates that are being killed by the pesticides that are used on the crops that provide the vegan menu? And then he says, oh, well, on second thought, I don't really care that much about insects. And then you say, well, okay, well, if you don't care about the insects, we'll put the honey aside for a moment, but let's talk about the birds that are starving to death because their staple food is the insects that used to exist but no longer exist because of the pesticides that are sprayed on the crops that produce the items on your menu, the vegan menu. And then all of a sudden, well, I don't really care about birds that much either. So then we can eat chicken. Then you're okay with us eating chickens and eggs. Oh, no, I didn't say that. So you just see this intellectual dishonesty again and again and again. It's shameful.
Yeah, and this isn't even the worst intellectual dishonesty. Trust me, I have debated the Nutrivore, and it's public on his channel. And let me tell you, this was a disaster of a debate. Um, I probably made some mistakes because it was my first debate ever, and but yeah, we also talked about crop deaths, and he basically wants to count in all the animals that die in the wildlands,
Like
and he wants to say, oh, those are also on the hands of meat eaters, basically, because you're not making these animals go extinct like we do, like the vegans do. So you're
right.
responsible for all the predation that happens in perpetuity, and so you can inflate the numbers that way. This is the
Right.
type of dishonesty we're dealing with.
Right. So that vegan line is saying, hey, we're killing so many animals that we're driving whole species into extinction. And this is good because extinct animals don't suffer.
Yeah,
Right.
this is, and actually the debate was about empirics, but then in the later debate with Sean Baker, he basically said, "Oh, actually, this is actually what I want. I want to abolish nature." Right. So when I asked him, "Hey, is this actually a normative claim that you are making about animals going extinct?" "Oh no, we're just talking about empirics here." But then he said to Sean Baker, "Oh, I actually want animals to go extinct." So I think this is a sign of desperation, to be honest, because they know that their diet kills more animals, so they say, "Oh, this is actually a good thing," you know.
Yeah. Oh, all right, here we go.
And again, vegans eat way more plant-based foods than non-vegans. Okay, so with all this said, this nonsense that most crops are for animals, this is 100% debunked. Okay, you can only look at this map and you can see that the vegans are full of shit. This map, if the vegans, what they're saying is true, then this map should be all blue, right? But it's mostly green. Okay, it's mostly green, meaning most is grown for human food. Okay, and also I want to give you some example what would actually happen in a vegan world. Okay, just to show you one example of one food item that is hugely destructive that would definitely increase in a vegan world. Okay, so coconut oil production is more destructive than palm oil production, with coconuts affecting 20 threatened species per million liters of oil produced, and palm oil only affecting 3.8 species per million liters. Okay, and palm oil would also increase in a vegan world, by the way. And but I want to focus on coconut oil because it's not that much talked about. Okay, coconut oil is a huge contributor to deforestation and animal destruction, environmental destruction, etc. And coconut oil is in many vegan products, including vegan donuts, for example. Okay, coconut oil is regularly used in vegan cooking in a range of excellent recipes and dishes, right? And yeah, we can also look at this market report, coconut oil market size, share growth trends and forecast. And it says right here, driving the coconut oil market growth is the growing popularity of vegan and plant-based diets. Coconut oil is a popular ingredient in vegan and plant-based recipes as it is a natural substitute for butter and other animal-based oils. So all these animal-based fats and oils, butter and tallow, would be replaced by vegetable oils and coconut oil, palm oil, soybean oil, etc.
One thing I want to say about this really pisses me off whenever I hear any vegan advocate talking about something like coconut oil being a natural substitute for butter. It in no way is a substitute for butter unless you were lubing up an axle or something. As far as human nutrition, it's missing all of the fat soluble vitamins that are found in butter. It doesn't have the same fatty acid profile of butter either. And butter contains the fatty acids that you find in a healthy human body. Coconut oil does not have the same fatty acids that you find in a healthy human body. But this thing where we keep seeing some corporate entity or a misled or even lying vegan talking about how something like coconut oil is a substitute. This is like the oat milk industry saying that it's a milk substitute. A substitute is something that replaces. So if you're removing an animal fat that's got all of these essential vitamins in it and you're replacing it with a plant oil that does not have all of the essential nutrients that you find in the animal fats, then by definition, you cannot call it a substitute. And this is why we have, babies ending up dying or coming close to death because parents out there, idiot parents that hear this, oh, it's a substitute, think that they can have give birth to a baby, a human baby, and immediately start feeding it oat milk instead of human milk. Oat milk is a misnomer. It's oat juice,
Yeah, and I think what they say or what they mean by substitute is a taste substitute, because even then it's not a real substitute. But the vegans are always saying, "Oh, you eat meat and you eat animal products for taste pleasure."
Taste, yeah.
Meanwhile, they're shoving down the vegan donuts with coconut oil that kills animals. So
Right.
it's actually projection on their part when they say taste pleasure. You kill animals for taste pleasure. Meanwhile, you're eating vegan donuts with coconut oil in it that kills animals for taste pleasure.
Right, exactly. Literally for taste pleasure. No essential nutrients there whatsoever.
Yeah. This would all increase in a vegan world. So this nonsense that vegans are not responsible for crop deaths or can sweep it under the rug. I'm sorry, but no, there's significant animal death on your hands, dear vegans. Okay. And like I said before, the most of the crops grown are for human consumption. Okay. If we measure it by harvested hectare of land, and if we are intellectually honest and not include the natural grassland that most livestock animals graze on, okay? If we actually only look at cropland, it's mostly for human consumption, okay? End of story.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that I found even more evidence of the fact that there would be an increase in crop deaths in the vegan world because we would be in a protein deficit in a vegan world. We would be in a nutritional deficit in a vegan world. We are actually already in that situation
Mhm.
because most of our food is plants worldwide. It's
Correct.
80% or 70%, something like that.
Yep.
Um, and we see diseases rising, we see nutritional deficiencies rising, anemia rising, protein deficiency rising, and but uh, animal food gets all the blame. Meanwhile, we are consuming mostly plants, yet we see all these diseases rise. It's
Mhm.
kind of interesting. But can I now share my screen because there are, of course, a lot of vegan arguments against the crop devs argument. A lot of them are, well, pretty much all of them are nonsensical. Um, and I want to debunk one recent argument that I saw um, on YouTube. Chief Jolly Roger made a video where he reacted to a debug your brain video. This vegan YouTuber debug your brain, and he made a video titled "Vegans are confused about crop devs." And his main argument is basically that animal agriculture is inefficient because of trophic levels, because the uh, because of all the heat units or calories that are lost along the way, reaching the animal, and reaching eventually the human. And I want to destroy this whole argument, essentially. So let me just share. Uh, wait. Let me just share the screen. I hope it works like it should.
Yeah.
Um, wait a second.
Oh,
Okay, can you see the screen?
there we go. Foods high in calories but low in protein.
Yes. So, I think that, the vegans, they got a fair point, We're wasting all these precious heat units called calories on all this animal nutrition when we could have, all this wonderful high calorie food. Who cares about the proteins and fats? Who needs that, right? We need those calories.
Yeah,
I
just
mean,
calories.
you know, um, in all seriousness, though, as you can see on the screen, there are many examples of foods that are high in calories, that got many calories, and yet they got low protein or nutrition in general, right? So it is not necessarily the case that we lose or that it is automatically inefficient that we feed calories, so many calories to animals that humans could eat or something like that, right? This is a bullshit argument that vegans are making. Um, Calories are heat energy. We derive energy from food in the form of chemical energy, biochemical energy. That means amino acids, that means minerals, that means vitamins. Those things are actually important for human metabolism, for the organ systems, for the cells, for the neurons, and many other things, muscles, etc. Right?
Hmm.
Another thing, because Debug Your Brain addressed this, and he actually cited this study that we always cite when we bring up the 86% of animal feed is inedible by human beings, right? He
Hmm.
cites the study, and the vegans want to debunk us with our own sources, right? And Debug Your Brain basically said that, oh, even in terms of protein, animal is inefficient because this study supposedly shows that there's not much protein gain or sometimes even loss when we look at human edible protein that we give to animals versus what we actually get out of these animals in terms of human edible protein. But the problem with that is that this study does not inform us on actual protein quality. Okay, it only looks at gross protein. I mean, unless I'm missing something here in the study, I looked at this study many times and I couldn't find any reference to the DIAS score, for example. which is used to assess protein quality. But luckily, there are actually studies that do look at that. Okay. And here in this article, one such study is illustrated that actually takes protein quality into account. So this is called a net protein contribution. And they basically look at what is the quality of feed protein that we feed the animals versus what is the quality of protein that we get out of the animals in terms of meat and so on and so forth, animal products. And what we can clearly see is that even grain finished cows, for example, contributes almost twice the amount of human edible protein it consumes. Okay, or but when we get to grass-fed cows, it is off the charts because those contributes almost 1,600 times the amount of human edible protein it consumes, because it consumes mainly grass and barely any grain or anything like that. So if vegans want to say that animal agriculture is inefficient, right, just show them these numbers here, because this is so far from being true. It is not even funny. Animal agriculture kicks ass, to be honest.
Yeah.
Okay. And
especially the regenerative pasture fed, natural prairie grass, natural prairie forages. That's the one that really, really kicks ass, which is the one that I promote.
Yes.
And go ahead.
And I also want to look at the pork production, right? And not just cows, but animal foods more in general. And by the way, those numbers come from Australia, but they can be generalized. It says in the study that these numbers can be applied to other countries, and it's basically the same picture. And I also found similar numbers for the US beef industry, for example. But okay, this is net protein contribution from an intensive Australian pork supply chain. Okay, now let me just read how they calculate this. So the net protein contribution for an Australian pork supply chain was calculated using actual published or estimated values for human edible fractions of feedstuffs, the percentage of protein available within raw materials considered to be human edible, recommended amino acid scoring patterns for infants, adults, adolescents, adults, published and calculated from standard reference nutrient databases, digestible, indispensable amino acids scores, so the DIAs basically, carcase yields and carcase composition from published studies, and actual feed formulations, feed volumes, and production data from a large Australian pork supply chain. The net protein contribution for the assessed Australian pork supply chain was 3.26. This means the supply chain generates more than 3 times the human edible protein it consumes in the process. So the net gain that we get is actually tripled. Okay. Here's also a very interesting table. So here you can see the human edible protein produced in terms of weight, just pure weight, and the human edible protein fat also in pure weight. And this is the kind of numbers that vegans use. They say, oh, look, the human edible protein produced in terms of weight is less than what we gave them as animal feed, right? However, when we take into account the actual protein quality, then it actually shows that we get a net positive, a huge net benefit out of it. We get 3 times as much protein out of these animal foods than we give them as feed in terms of grains mainly. Okay. And the last study I want to show is an Austrian study that also looked at the also chickens and other livestock animals. When accounting for differences in protein quality between human animal plant inputs and animal products, not only cattle but also laying hens, sheep, and goats increase the value of protein available for human consumption. Except for growing fattening bulls, about 50% of feed protein and energy for ruminants was derived from uh, grassland, which could otherwise not be used for human food production. The results of this study showed that depending on the production system, the transformation process of feed into food of animal origin results in either an increase or decrease of the available food for human consumption, but it always increases protein quality. Right. And also, this study here, this recent study, narrative review, looked at plant-based diet scenarios. So when we would replace all animal protein with plant protein, and it comes to this conclusion: complete replacement of animal to plant sourced foods reduced protein adequacy when compared with baseline diets and partial replacements. This is especially true for vulnerable uh, groups such as children and elderly people. And it also says here more environmental resources and higher intake of plant foods are required to attain the same nutritional outputs, e.g., meeting total indispensable amino acid requirements as animal foods. And what has to be said here is that we are already in such a situation, because when we correct for protein utilizability and digestibility, most countries, or pretty much all countries on this planet, are not meeting their average daily protein requirement. This comes from a study by Morkhan, and this was illustrated on the Substack by uh, Dr. Peter Ballerstedt, who looks into these kinds of questions around protein. And pretty much all the world is already protein deficient. Meanwhile, 80% of our food calories come from plant-based food
Right.
sources around the
So I'm
world.
going to tell people real quickly what they're looking at with that graph. They've got a blue line up there that goes all the way across, and that is the average daily protein requirement. And then those vertical blue lines are different countries and territories that are not meeting the average daily protein requirement.
Yeah, right. And this is also not just true for developing countries, but also for America. The same Substack post points out how 40% of Americans are not meeting their protein requirement, actually. And this is supposed to be, a rich country where everybody is eating hamburgers and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
But protein is missing, and this would be worse in a vegan world. I guarantee you that. Here's also a graph from another study that shows a correlation between lack of animal foods and children stunting. Okay. And you can see that the stunting is highest. The black points are the children stunting, and the graphs here are the available animal food. And as you can see, there's an inverse relationship. So the less animal food, the more stunting. I mean, of course, this is just a correlation. There are other factors, socioeconomic factors. I understand that, but it's nonetheless an interesting correlation there. And vegans use correlations all the time, so I can do that as well.
Yeah,
And
so this is
there's
showing a correlation between the lack of animal protein in a diet and stunting of growth in
yeah.
children.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So again, the points are the stunting, pretty much, and the the bars are the
Animal.
animal foods. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And of course vegans are saying that this is just a correlation, but when they pull out all kinds of correlations, then all of a sudden it becomes causative. So
Mhm.
yeah, no double standard there, right?
No. No. No.
And here's again the 10-diet scenario study. I really love the study because it actually looks also at, or it takes into account macronutrients and the macronutrient profile of each diet scenario. And again, when we compare the baseline um, protein, daily grams of protein per capita versus the vegan diet scenario, daily protein per capita, then there's a reduction there. So the baseline is 92.1 grams of daily protein per capita versus the vegan diet scenario, 74 grams of protein per day per capita. So yeah, a huge reduction also what this study shows. And again, increase nonetheless in cultivated cropland. So more crops but less nutrition, pretty much. And some vegans might be saying, "Oh, but what about the perennial cropland and the grazing lands? That is decreasing in a vegan diet scenario." Yes, but again, the grazing land doesn't use any pesticides, so not what we are actually talking about when we talk about crop deaths. And the perennial cropland is mainly used for stuff like alfalfa or hay and stuff like that, which, according to the Center for Food Safety, uh, 93% of all alfalfa planted by farmers in the U.S. is grown without the use of any herbicides. So there's barely any pesticides uh, used there, even though Monsanto tries to change that, but this is not on the meat eaters' responsibility. And in essence, you don't have to use pesticides to grow or for hay and alfalfa. And again, I've shown this in my video. Here's again this graph about nutritional and greenhouse gas impacts of removing animals from U.S. agriculture, and you can see an increase in crops, but a decrease in nutrition. And again, also the stuff about what we've seen in the video, the pesticide footprints. This is nothing new. What I also want to show real quick is the greenhouse gas emission stuff, because vegans are always saying, "Oh, meat has such a high greenhouse gas impact," but they never factor in nutrition. So if we level different food groups for nutrition and how much they would be costing us in terms of greenhouse gas footprints, then the picture changes, because we would have to actually um, eat and produce more plant-based foods, and thus these associated environmental footprint would radically increase, versus meat that we don't have to consume that much to get adequate nutrition, such as zinc, calcium, folate, vitamin A, and B12. And really, what is top notch here is beef liver, right? Because beef liver is pretty much the most nutrient dense food ever, and you don't have to consume that much to get adequate amounts of zinc, calcium, folate, vitamin A, and vitamin B12. And thus, it actually is not only a health food, but also a very environmentally friendly food, you know. Um, and again, also, what I want to show about soybeans, because vegans are always saying that most soybeans are for the animals, even though that is measured in weight. So 80% or 75% or something goes to the animals. If you measure it in weight, sure. But what you have to realize is that most of the soybeans are actually crushed, and the and the result of that crushing results in soybean oil and soybean meal. And the soybean oil is actually the driving force behind the crushing because it has the higher profit margins. As this market report points out, since there's so much more meal value than oil value, it would appear that meal value would have greater weight in determining the profitability of soy crush margins. But the chart and correlation statistics indicate that more often than not, soybean oil is the real driver. And we have further indication that soybean oil is the real driver because because across a time period of 10 years, we see a consistent pattern of soybean oil price being higher than soybean meal price. This is from a study that uses FAO data. And we have also additional graphs from Statista. The average prices for soybean oil worldwide from 2014 to 2024. And it is, for example, in 2022, the average price for soybean oil stood at 1,667 nominal US dollars per metric ton. And this is really high, even compared to the soybeans themselves, right? So here's the average price for soybeans in general worldwide in the same time period using the same metrics. And it is actually lower than the soybean oil. So the soybean oil is priced higher than the soybeans themselves, which is really crazy. The average price in 2022 was 540 nominal US dollars per metric ton. And higher price means more money gained from per unit sold, which means higher profit margins. And profitability is what makes the world go round in our economy. So this is likely the driver behind soybean oil, soybean cultivation in general. It is the oil, pretty much. And yeah, with that, we can leave it at that for now, I think. Yeah.
Okay. That was great. Great information. I appreciate.
But yeah, basically, what I want, I know this was much information at the same time, but basically 2 points. Number one, animal agriculture is very efficient. Calories don't matter. Don't let vegans fool you about calories and thermodynamics or anything like that. Nutrition and protein quality is what matters. And in that aspect, animal agriculture knocks it out the park completely. It uses land that we cannot otherwise use for any other purpose and agricultural purpose, and is giving us so much high quality protein that we are lacking worldwide because we are consuming way too much plants and not so much animal sourced foods. So animal agriculture is very efficient, and the stuff about and basically in a vegan world we would further lack these nutrients, which we would all have to replace. And the process of replacing them is basically a sign that crop production would have to increase in order to even basically subsist,
Mm-hmm. Well, the fact that we're even here this far along into the conversation proves that veganism is a lie, because the whole conversation started with the vegans claiming over and over and over and over again that animals don't die for a vegan menu, and that the vegan menu is cruelty free. And then they had to admit that, actually some animals do die during crop production, but they try to limit that to us only knowing about those animals that were too stupid, too slow, too asleep to get out of the way of a combine harvester, the ones that just get mangled by the machinery. And then we proved that no, it's not just those crop deaths, it's also the crop deaths that occur through all of the lethal crop protection measures, all of the destructive ways that they produce all of the agrochemicals themselves, the runoff, the all of the erosion, the oceanic dead zones are caused by the crop agriculture that creates the items on the vegan menu. So, now what we've got is that we've got a vegan cult that's actually admitting that the crop agriculture, the factory crop agriculture that produces the items on the vegan menu, is more deadly than all of animal agriculture. But now they're trying to, again, which we've proven wrong again today, they were backed into that corner and they're saying, well, it might be true that crops kill more, but most of those crops are grown to feed livestock. And you and I have shown today and again on other days and videos that is just not true.
Yes, and even when vegans acknowledge, they are still going like, oh, but a cow needs more human edible crops than a human being, which might be true, but again, sheer weight or sheer calories is not equating to nutrition necessarily. We have to look at this from a nutritional perspective in order to see if this is really such a big waste. And as I've just illustrated, is actually a big gain to have animal agriculture in terms of nutrition. This is not a waste at all. Actual waste is growing all kinds of non-bioavailable crops like soybeans, and that depletes the soil and where we get barely any nutrition out of. So that's the actual waste there. But someone asked, can you ask Anti-War Mindset if he's also the channel owner of A Shield for Men? Yes, that is my second channel basically. I'm also a men's rights activist, and this is pretty much my second channel where I talk about men's rights, and I'm against feminism because feminism is a destructive movement, just like veganism. But that is maybe for another stream, because these movements are actually quite similar and tied together in some ways, actually.
Yeah, well, there's lots of different facets to this disco ball of chaos that they're engineering all the time around the world. So, from diet to they're sabotaging our nutrition, they're sabotaging our families, they're sabotaging our gender roles, they're sabotaging our children's education. Everything is engineered into chaos if possible, and it doesn't matter whether it's nutrition or gender studies. It's all designed to kind of bring about this mentality of an end of the world scenario. And there's a lot of people that just love to promote this idea that it's the end of the world. But we could correct all of this if we could kind of in unison across the world kind of drop this teeny pop culture on its ass and go outside, get some sunshine, get some exercise, meet your neighbors, do a favor for a neighbor, shake some hands, and stop drinking from the fountain of, again, this teeny pop culture that is anywhere from entertainment media to the mainstream news media. It's all designed to demoralize and and miseducate. So
Yeah, sure. Um, yeah. Okay, but let's also talk about some other counters to the crop devs argument,
yeah,
because there are many more counters actually. For example, you have covered that vegans are saying, "Oh, but those devs are actually justified because this is our property and we have to protect our food source. So all of that is justified." Let me just point out, I mean, you have done many videos why this is nonsense, because there's colonialists back in the day that had the same argument. This is our land now, we can do what we want. We plant the flag here, and even though they are the ones that initiated the aggression, so that the crop farmer is the first that broke the rules or broke the negative rights, right? Because negative right means the right to be left alone, and the crop farmer doesn't leave the animals alone, does he? You know? So he's the first one who initiated the aggression. Yet supposedly the animals are the ones breaking the rules, which is total insanity. I know Vegan Games brings up this argument a lot,
mhm.
as if these animals even understood the concept of rights. But another argument is what they're basically indicating with that sort of argumentation is they're making it seem like the crop farmer, in order to protect the crops, can just do whatever they want. Can you imagine if, for example, I have a garden and some burglar is trying to get into my garden, right? Trespassing.
Right.
And instead of a shotgun, I use, in order to defend myself, defend my property, which is my right to some extent, you know. But it is not my right to just then pull out some huge tear gas and just spray this all over the neighborhood, or drop some atom bomb in order to protect my property or something. I mean, it has to be proportional, right? It has to be proportional. It cannot just pollute the whole area, the whole neighborhood, right? And
Yeah.
this is where their argument kind of falls apart, because they're making it seem like, oh, everything is allowed when we have to protect our crops, which is not remotely the case, not even in principle. And on top of that, a lot of these crops that vegans say, oh, this is our food source, this is so important. I, I mean, you're talking about strawberries, we're talking about kale. Is this really so important that we have to drive animals into extinction for some cash crops? There are a lot of crops that are called cash crops that are essentially luxuries. Those are not essential for human civilization or for human survival or nutrition in any way, shape, or form. So this completely falls apart. And on top of that, there's even a layer on top of that. The thing about human survival, right? They say, oh, we must protect human civilization, we must protect our food source. But ironically, the way you're doing the agriculture and the way you're protecting the crops actually destroys our food source and actually destroys our ability to grow food and to have civilization in the future sustainably. So this whole argument just completely falls apart, this whole property protection argument.
Yeah, like you said, they don't acknowledge the fact that the animals were there first. Before the crops came along, the animals were there, and it was the crop farmer that if we're going to attribute rights to animals, then it would be the crop farmer that drew first blood by displacing all of those wild animals with these destructive monocrops. And the vegans completely ignore that. And then when the animals come back to their home and start to feast on the crops that the farmer planted in their place, Then the vegan wants to scream, aha, the animal is now infringing on the property rights of the farmer that produces my menu. Therefore, I do not care if the farmer shoots all of the animals, poisons all of the animals, because the animal was infringing on the farmer's property rights. So that is just another example of the harmful intellectual dishonesty that we see coming from the vegan kill cult.
Yeah, and the logic is very sort of, for example, there were the enclosure movements in England that actually kick-started our what we call the capitalist system, or however you want to call it. And they were basically privatizing the commons and driving off farmers off their land, and were forcing them into the cities. And this is sort of the same principle, because a lot of these farmers, they didn't want to be off their land, right? And naturally they fought back, and then they sort of, oh, but it's our property now, it's our private property, so we are justified to do this with you. It's kind of the same logic in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just intellectual dishonesty is all it is. And they'll twist it, any way they can in order to try to put a good spin on veganism. But veganism, at the end of the day, has absolutely nothing to do with health. It has absolutely nothing to do with benefit for the animals. Vegans do not care if you kill an animal. What they want to know is, are you going to eat that animal after you kill it? If you don't eat the animal after you kill it, according to the vegans, that's okay. It's okay to kill the animal as long as you don't eat it.
Yeah, this shows the misanthropic nature of the whole thing, actually.
Yes, it does. Absolutely does.
Another thing that I also find curious is the whole contradictory philosophy of Nick the Nutrivore, who we both debated, and he he basically said in the debate with Sean Baker, and Nick basically pointed out how he wants to. Basically, started out by saying that his definition of veganism is basically giving animals and humans the same rights, or equating animals with human rights. I'm grossly paraphrasing it, but that's basically what it boils down to, right? So more equivalence between humans and animals, right? This is also what other vegans are saying. This is what the name the trade arguments revolves around to some extent. So they want to equate humans and animals morally and legally, but on the other hand, uh, Nick the Nick the Nutrivore, he wants to abolish nature, which would be an animal genocide. So how does this square with humans and animals being equal? Because then the logical extension of that is humans also, have to die according to that logic. Because the reason behind him wanting to abolish nature is because there's a lot of suffering in nature, a lot of predation. Animals die and suffer in nature. But then Sean Baker asked him, what are you going to replace that with? And it's the human civilization, human infrastructure. I'm sorry, but there's a lot of suffering also in human civilization, and probably even more. So, according to that logic, we would also have to abolish human civilization and humanity. You know, so but how does the square with giving humans and animals equal rights? This is a total contradiction. And
Yeah.
it also doesn't make sense then to say, oh, but in order to sustain humanity, we have to kill all these animals for the crops. But wait a minute, according to your own logic, you don't actually care about the continuing existence of humanity because you hate suffering and humans like animals suffer and you want to abolish that. So why are you caring suddenly that we say you shouldn't, or why are you saying that there's a justification to continue humanity for these crops? I mean, this is such a weird philosophy, you know?
Well, going all the way back to my first video on this subject was the first vegan kill cult video. And at the end of that, I explained that, if we leave this unchecked, then veganism is going to lead to a barren and lifeless planet. And that
Yeah.
was years before Nutrivore came onto the scene. But now Nutrivore is on the scene, and Vegan Gains and others like him have picked up that flag of death and destruction. And now you've got mainstream veganism starting to admit that their ultimate goal is to wipe out absolutely all life on Earth in order to ensure no suffering.
Yeah, I think this is also the logical implication of the vegan philosophy itself, right? Suffering is bad, therefore, and life contains suffering, so life must go. That's basically the philosophy in a nutshell, and what's implied logically in the vegan philosophy, you know. And I mean, Nutrivore said that we should ditch this ball. He was referring to Earth. We should ditch this ball and go some other place, but some other place also has suffering, and so like, what's the point?
Well, there is no point other than, I see him as the brand of vegan that's just trying to, in any way possible, justify perhaps depopulation of the earth, you know, um, wipe, mass extinction of the animals is just, unfortunately, at the end of the day, what you've got is a religion that's been labeled veganism. It's being pushed by all of the major and most destructive corporations around the world. And, they, the entire religion's got like you said, a misanthropic aura about it. The whole thing boils down to misanthropy at the end of the day. It has absolutely nothing to do with the benefit of animals. It's a very dangerous. It's, to me, what I see is they're using veganism as a foot in the door to potentially bring about a global holodomor, which would be a global famine that would result in a 90 or 99 or even 100% reduction in the human population. So veganism is a very evil cult. And I think the reason I'm here, the reason I think you're here, is that we're just trying to show people the truth. We want to pull back that curtain, and we want would-be victims of the vegan cult to see that the claims that they make are not true. Their motivations are not well-to-do at all. Their motivations are misanthropic. Um, and it's just a big mountain of lies. There's nothing that a vegan can tell you that's going to be the truth. And there's nothing that's going to come from a Bayer Monsanto or any of these corporations that we know would benefit under a global vegan mandate. They are lying. Klaus Schwab is lying to you. And there's this is why, what is it, more than 80% of vegans will drop out in the first 24 months. because of health issues, because the vegan diet is nutritionally deficient. And, it's bad enough for one individual to cause themselves to suffer. But if, let's say, that individual is a female of reproductive age and somehow on a vegan diet ends up getting pregnant, well, now they're very likely to have some type of birth defect. The child is going to suffer now. And that's going to be a lifelong situation of suffering. So veganism is a very evil cult. And I just want people to see that for themselves. And that's why I'm here.
Yeah, the thing about the birth defects that you mentioned there, it's not just about the missing nutrients, but if vegans are eat non-organic, they actually have the highest pesticide exposure in their diet in the forms of pesticide residues. And they also have the highest heavy metal intake in forms of cadmium, for example. And they're not just in leafy greens or anything, but they're also in their supplements. Supplements are hugely contaminated, actually. And those things also lead to cancer, leukemia, birth defects, etc. So the vegan diet is not just missing in nutrients, but it's also contaminated with a lot of stuff that we don't want in our diet, such as heavy metals, pesticide residues, and mycotoxins, anti-nutrients, also oxalates. So it's probably one of the most toxic diets as well. It's not just the most deficient diet, but also the most toxic one, or one of the most toxic ones.
Yeah, someone had told me about the mycotoxins in grains, and I recently found out that there were high levels of mycotoxins in mushrooms as well, which is another, vegans like to grill up a portobello. Portobellos happen to be full of mycotoxins. This is the mycotoxin issue is a hugely underreported story for all plant-based diets.
Yes, and there's a little bit of literature on this, but vegans do have higher urine levels of mycotoxins than non-vegans. So
yeah,
at least for some studies.
Yes, I have seen that.
And also higher amounts of heavy metals.
Right. Which explains some of their explains quite a few things about vegans. It explains to some degree the high dropout rate. It explains you've got some of these vegans, a lot of these vegan activists are, like, for instance, it's possible for the human body to store up enough vitamin B12 to last for 5 years. And, you've got some of these vegans that are stepping up to the plate, wanting to become vegan activists, saying, I've been a vegan for 3 years and I'm not dead, so what you're saying must not be true. Well, the fact of the matter is that some of these the deficiencies are conditional. They're waiting. All life is doing is waiting for the vegan to get sick, and then all of a sudden now, creatine is now an essential nutrient for that individual. There's a long list of conditionally essential nutrients that vegans ignore, and I didn't even know about. I instinctively knew, but I didn't know that it had actually been studied and written about and labeled as these conditionally essential nutrients. But like you said, it's just the nutrition is not accounted for with the studies that promote the veganism. They talk about the calories instead of the essential nutrients. And then whenever you try to corner them about the essential nutrients, and they say, well, there really is no such thing as an essential nutrient. And this is, what we get from these vegan activists, that they just constant lies coming from these people, and has absolutely nothing to do with concern for animals or human nutrition, health.
Yes, and what you said about vegans that say, "Oh, I'm 3 years vegan, or 5 years vegan, or 10 years vegan, and I'm still doing good." There are some vegans who say that, right? And maybe they're feeling okay or feeling great even, you know, and that's wonderful and all of that. But the thing is, I've asked this question multiple vegans, because vegans are always saying that, oh, the vegan diet is healthy and sustainable for all stages of life. They're referencing this fake quote from this paper that is expired. But I always ask them, okay, then name me one vegan that actually has gone through all stages of life on a vegan diet, without cheating, without eating animal products, and has made it through life, um, on a vegan diet, 100% plant-based, healthy and happy and longevity and everything. Name me that vegan. And usually they cannot name me that vegan. No vegan has named me that particular individual. Vegans have this name the trait challenge. I have the name the vegan challenge. Name me the vegan that has actually gone through all stages of life on a vegan diet without cheating. And when I mean all stages of life, I don't just mean birth, I mean conception, because the biological consensus is that human life begins at conception. So I want also the parents, or the mother at least, to be vegan, in that scenario, right? I don't want it in real life, of course, God forbid. Don't quote me on that. But, um, you know, no vegan can actually point me to that vegan. And that is reason why that is because no such individual exists, actually. So on paper, you can make up all kinds of arguments. Oh, in theory, this diet works perfectly and it's healthy and sustainable and works for everyone. But in practice, where's the practice? Where's the practical proof that it actually works for all people, for all stages of life? Up the fetus level to the old man or old woman. Where's the evidence for that? Doesn't exist.
Yeah. I've been doing some pretty interesting exercises with these AI chatbots. They're all vegan activists. And so if you ask them about human diet or veganism, they always promote veganism. And so I like to argue with them like they're vegans. The difference between an AI bot, a chatbot, and a vegan is that the AI chatbot will lie to you like a vegan, but when caught and corrected, they actually are programmed to admit that they were wrong. Whereas the vegan will, even in the face of unsurmountable facts that prove veganism is a lie, they will stick to their guns and they will not admit that they're spreading falsehoods and that veganism is a dangerous diet that leads to sickness and death. But yeah, I've been thinking about making some videos just featuring how these AI chatbots are essentially programmed to be vegan activists, but you can show them the facts, and they'll admit things like they'll make claims about protein, for instance, and then you say, okay, you're saying that there's this much protein, there's enough protein here, but let's talk about the digestibility of the protein. And then the AI chatbot will pull up the facts on that and say, well, yeah, the digestibility of the protein in X, Y, or Z plant is 2%. And then you say, well, yeah, okay, so 2% of it is actually bioavailable. But earlier you were telling me that it was a great source of these vitamins. And in light of these new facts, you have to admit that you were wrong when you made that first claim. And the AI chatbot will say, oh, well, thank you for bringing that to my attention. You're absolutely correct. A vegan would never do that, but the AI chatbots, at least at this point of their employment, will admit when they've been lying. They won't admit to the lie, but they'll admit that they were wrong. But of course, they're programmed. The programmers are programming them to promote the vegan diet.
Yeah, what I notice is that they're referencing our world and data a lot of times, and also all
Mhm.
kinds of vegan websites. Because the chatbot spits out some answers and they have a reference there, and then you can see the reference. Oh, it's our world and data, and I
Mhm.
think veganhealth.org or some other website or that they use. So
Mhm. Yeah, and I've even kind of cornered the chatbot into. They'll say, "Well, thank you." The chatbot will thank me for teaching them and raising this issue. They didn't consider this before. From now on, they will factor that into their claims. And then the next day, I go back to the same chatbot, ask the same question, and have the exact same conversation as I did the day before, because the chatbot is not incorporating these new facts into its algorithm. Um, it's programmed to discard the facts that do not support the vegan narrative.
yeah, at least the chatbot is more polite. I have many. I had many interactions with vegans that were just very rude and aggressive that I had to
Mhm.
eventually ban from my channel, because they were calling me a shill for the meat industry or something,
Yeah,
and this is not really the kind of conduct that I tolerate on my channel. But um, yeah, I had some back and forth with vegans myself, and I was providing them with references and different types of studies. They don't address many things that you actually say and spam you with some new things. They never address your points, or almost never, or try to nitpick something from your study, even though their studies are actually just as bad or even worse in some cases. But
yeah,
so they
yeah,
they they have a epistemic standard that is raised for your kind of evidence, but for their own kind of evidence, it is substantially lowered. So,
right. Yeah,
you also mentioned something about global starvation if veganism came to pass. I think that even if this was not wanted, right? Even if this was not the intention
mhm,
by some of these vegans, I think this would inevitably ensue if global veganism was tried as let's say as an experiment. It would not be a long-lived experiment because for multiple reasons. Because the pollinators that pollinate most of the plants on this planet, 80% of the planets, well, one of the driving forces that drives them to extinctions is pesticides. And pesticides, as we have discussed, would be rising in the vegan world. So that would not be something that is actually sustainable long term.
yeah. Not just the pesticides, because the pesticides are driving animals into extinction at such a high rate that it's threatening the entire food web. But all of these chemicals, from the pesticides to the synthetic nitrogen that they spray on soybeans, and these are finite resources. The mined phosphorus, the mined potassium, these are finite resources. So veganism, really, no matter which perspective you look at it from, is a dead end street, a very short dead end street.
Right. Yeah. The the phosphate and the petroleum are finite resources. But the vegans, they would say, oh, but this is used by non-vegan farmers. So in a magical vegan world, we would be veganic. We would have veganic farming, and we would have vertical farming, and we would have polycropping, and all sorts of another nonsense that is actually not scalable to feed the entire human population. So
Yeah. Not only is it not scalable, but the primary vegan staples like soybeans, all the grains, uh, all the fruits, none of these are even, you can't even grow them in, say, a vertical farm or what they call veganic farming, you know.
yeah,
Um, and I've even tried to have some of these so-called veganic farmers on my channel, but once they find out that I want to dig into their operation and find out where are you sourcing all of these wood chips from, for instance, as soon as they find out that I'm about to expose the fraudulent nature of their farm, oh, they don't want to talk to me anymore. And so, they want to leave. They want to leave vegans in the dark and have them still running around saying, "Well, we're going to have vertical farming. We're going to have veganic farming." That's there's vegans that believe that, but the farmers that are actually uh, trying to practice this type of farming, they know better. They know that it's a lie. It's way too expensive. Vertical farming, for instance, you'd have to you'd have to build something. I forgot, I did the math one day, but it's millions and millions and millions of vertical skyscrapers would have to be uh, built in order to replace conventional agriculture because of the gargantuan amounts of hectares that are involved. We don't have the steel for it. We don't have the resources to mine that steel. We don't have the resources to make it out of plastic if we wanted to. We will always require crop farming, and this idea that vegans have that, well, and if you kind of corner them on that and prove that what they're promoting is basically a myth, then they'll pull out the old appeal to ignorance, which is, well, we don't know what we might invent in the future that could replace conventional agriculture. In other words, you don't have that in mind now. No, but I have faith in human ingenuity. Well, human ingenuity, it doesn't matter how much human ingenuity you've got. You cannot overcome scientific limitations to those types of agriculture or these nutritional limitations of a plant-based diet.
yeah. I mean, essentially, vegans are thinking like children, and everything is possible. And we are in a Star Trek movie, and we can just pull out some technology out of our rear end and reimagine a world. I mean, I recently saw a video where lifting vegan logic talked to rationality rules. He was talking about something about uh, predators not being relevant anymore in nature when we could have robots that have some meat attached to them, and or some lab grown meat or something, and the predators chase these robots with the meat on them instead of actual animals, and therefore we could reduce the suffering or some bullshit like that. This is the type of thinking that vegans have. Everything is artificial, and who cares about externalities and ecological imbalances? In Star Trek logic, basically.
Mhm.
But I also want to say about polycropping, because I wasn't aware of that until recently, and I've researched that a little bit, and it seems to be the case that the crop yield is lower among polycropping than when compared to monocropping, because there's competition among these type of crops for nutrients in the soil that will limit the amount of yield you can have. And so this idea that we can scale that up and feed the world that way is also mysterious, to say the least.
Yeah, mysterious.
But yeah, the vegan, they make a appeal to ignorance or question begging fallacy, but we can do the same thing. This argument goes both ways. Maybe in the future, animal agriculture will be, without any deaths or without any suffering, whatever, right? We can pull out bullshit out of our rear end too,
Very true. Yeah, we can make the same unfounded claims that they're making.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
So
we could breed a cow with no emotions and no pain receptors.
yeah, pretty much. We can make the same arguments like the vegans are making. Appeal to Star Trek logic.
Yeah, science fiction. Veganism is definitely a appeal to science fiction.
And what you also, this is also what I wanted to talk about. I made a video titled "Veganism is Impossible on a Global Scale," where I pointed out that veganism is probably not even possible without causing major famine and threats to food security and self-sustainability, because we would remove one layer of food security, because the food system at large is less diverse. When you have both animal agriculture and plant agriculture, now you only have plant agriculture. Well, what can affect plant agriculture is this little thing called harvest failure or crop failure, which can be caused by floods, heavy rainfall floods, can be caused by climate change, can be caused by different weather extremes, droughts, can be caused by supply chain supply chain issues, can be caused by fungal infections, right? So imagine if we all depended only on plant agriculture and what the vegans want, and we had no additional layer of security. Imagine all these small scale farmers who depend now on animal agriculture. When they have a crop failure, they have always animal agriculture to rely on. They have their animals, their livestock that they can sell, or they can sell the products of these livestock, or they can eat these livestock even and survive that way. But if there's no livestock, then that's not a possibility anymore. And this also goes not just for like the global south, but pretty much also for the entire world in general, but especially in the global south. Um, and also, you cannot grow crops everywhere, like we just discussed. But this is also not just a soil issue, but also a climate issue. Can you imagine a vegan Iceland, for example, or vegan Norway, or vegan
Yeah.
Sweden? Right now, they're very self-sufficient when it comes to meat production, animal agriculture production. Even Germany, 80 to 100% of our meat supply is self-sufficient, pretty much.
Mhm.
Same with dairy, and almost the same with eggs. But when it comes to fruits and vegetables, it is we have to import 80%, roughly 80% of our fruits and vegetables. So if animal agriculture isn't there anymore, we would have to largely import our foods in this vegan scenario. Versus even with countries like Iceland, they would have to import almost 100% of their food in a vegan scenario. can you imagine that, what this does to food security? And I mean, the countries that you're importing your food from, they have leverage over you. They have geopolitical leverage over you. Also, the weather is not always, or the harvest is not always great in these countries. So if there's a harvest failure in one country, then it leads to a chain reaction of starvation in other countries. So this is one thing that veganism also fails at, is food security, um, food system robustness, and food self-sufficiency. This is, by the way, an argument that I want to push more forward against veganism, because I think this should be pushed more, this kind of argument that I just made.
Yeah, I think that your average vegan just isn't a thinker. You know, they don't think about thing. They mostly just emote. You know, they're just riding a sea of emotions. But if you get into reading the publications put out by organizations like the World Economic Forum, then what they seem to be kind of hinting towards is that those places like Iceland, which could not survive under a global vegan mandate, that they would fall under the umbrella of this this mass migration that they keep that they continue to predict, where people are forced to migrate from their part of the world. And so, you know, I think that the powers that be, what they're planning on is number one, a decrease in the human population, and number two, those who are left be herded into these smart cities, where they will be allotted their nutrition as the powers that be see fit, where no one is self-sufficient, and every bit of nutritional sustenance that every person in the world receives is divvied out to them based on a social credit score. So, yeah, most vegans haven't thought this through, and really they refuse to, because thinking's hard for them. And so, you know, again, they go back to don't confuse me with the details. Just show me some more animal torture porn so I can try to refrain from satisfying this meat craving that I keep getting.
Yeah, and a lot of those, a lot of this animal torture porn is staged and fabricated. Um,
Yeah,
because
PETA has been caught paying for it.
yeah,
They've been caught paying people to torture animals in order to film it and then show it to vegans and blame that on animal agriculture.
yeah, pretty much. And I mean, this already shows you that they don't actually care about the animals, because they're most likely hurting the animals in the process of faking that material.
Oh no, they've actually carried out. Um, I'm working on some videos where some of this stuff will be exposed, but there are people that have confessed to being paid to, for instance, skin a mink alive, right? Skin it alive, just to portray the false narrative that this is standard practice. We don't even bother killing the animal, you know, quickly putting it out of its misery, and then skinning the animal for its fur. They're trying to portray this idea that standard practice in that industry is to hang the animal up while it's perfectly alive and skin it. And finally having a skinned animal that's still sitting there breathing, looking at you like, what have you just done? And they've actually been, you know, I've seen guys in tears of pain and regret and regret on several levels. Part of it, the fact that they wish they had never taken that money to torture the animal, and then realizing that that footage is now being used to demonize their industry. Um, look into staged animal torture footage, PETA, and you'll find these individuals that were featured in these videos on film admitting that they would never have done that. That that's not standard practice, but they were approached by these animal rights activists and paid cash to actually follow through with the torture porn so that it could be videoed and then paraded around by misanthropes, vegan misanthrope activists.
Yeah, yeah, I heard about that. I think this was a case in China, wasn't it?
China, among other countries, yeah. I can't remember the specific one that I'm thinking about, but it wasn't in the United States. It was somewhere else. But yeah, it would be financially detrimental for any of those industries to waste any time torturing animals or to try to skin an animal while it's alive. It's much more efficient to quickly and painlessly kill the animal and then skin it. You don't want this animal screaming and thrashing around while you're trying to harvest the skin or the fur, which is supposed to be, you want it to be as undamaged as possible because it's going to be used as a material to make a coat or to keep someone warm or make some work gloves so that some farmer can go out there and work in the fields so that the vegans have something to eat. So veganism is just one of the most corrupt organizations that you could ever find. I mean, it is corrupt and it's misanthropic.
That is true. By the way, I heard that recently the channel Debug the Brain made a video titled "Vegans versus Carnivores: Who Kills More Animals." Maybe we can react to this on his live stream. I haven't watched this video before, but I'm pretty sure there's gonna be some funny things that we can say about that.
Yeah, let's do that on our next live stream. And let's don't watch it in between now and then. Let's leave it, fresh for us to react to. But that's a great idea. Let's do that next time.
Yeah, I think that the arguments are probably going to be the same, like, oh, here's calories that we are not getting. Look at the thermodynamics and stuff like that. Those are usually the kinds of arguments. They're making appeals to thermodynamics as if humans are steam engines and we are powered by heat or something.
Right. The calorie arguments.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, there are at least 20 nutrients that are missing from the vegan diet, such as DHA, EPA, vitamin B12, D3, retinol, zinc, choline, calcium, iodine, many others.
Yeah. Well, do you have anything else for today?
Not really. I think we have gone through the main counter arguments to the crop devs argument very swiftly. I think that the counter arguments against the crop devs argument are very weak. They're actually more excuses than anything else, because vegans, they like to point at others from a moral high horse, but when they're actually confronted about their moral failings, then they find all kinds of justifications and excuses and misdirect. So it shows that these people are fundamentally hypocrites and not serious people. Um, but yeah, I think that at some point you can bring on Carson or Michael McCaffrey, and then we can have a discussion with these people about various things, crop deaths, nutrition, whatever it is. I've definitely
Yeah,
some questions for them.
yeah. If there's the vegans that are watching right now, if you guys want to recruit your two best discussers slash debaters, and we'll have the two of them on, and it'll be 2 versus 2, and we'll see if we can talk some sense into your two representatives.
Yeah,
Sound-
I mean, you have your. I mean, you're so confident that your utopian ideas work. So so you shouldn't be afraid, right?
well, they shouldn't. They shouldn't be. But it's people like you and myself that we're actually the heavy hitters when it comes to trying to fight off this vegan misanthropy. But they won't. The really big influencers like Earthling Ed, Joey Carbstrong, they don't want to mess with people like us. What they want to do is they want to feature someone like Sean Baker, someone like Ted Nugent, people that really aren't, they're not making the best case against veganism. And the best case against veganism you're going to find on the Garland Farms channel and the Anti-War Mindset channel. That, in my opinion, these are the two best channels out there when it comes to culminating the facts that debunk the vegan lies and the vegan narrative.
Yeah, thank you for that. I definitely feel honored by that. There are many other great anti-vegan channels. Chief Jolly Roger is another one that I definitely recommend. There's also another one. I think it's called Ryan Investigates. This one is also really good. Um, yeah, there are many anti-vegan, smaller anti-vegan channels, but in general, I would just say to the carnivore or anti-vegan community that we need to make a holistic case against veganism and not just say, "Oh, we are carnivores and veganism is unhealthy." I mean, yes, these things are true, but there needs to be more said than that, because vegans are making all sort of ridiculous claims. They're making claims about the environment, the climate, the sustainability, the ethics, and uh, you know the animals. So these things also have to be addressed, you know, and not just oh, fiber isn't actually healthy or something like that, you know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that the crop deaths argument is neglected by larger carnivore audiences, unfortunately, or isn't really. I mean, it's sometimes mentioned here and there, but it's not really expanded upon like it should be, you know.
Yeah. Well, one thing, you and I may not be on the exact same page as far as the optimal human diet, but my position is that a strict carnivore diet is not ideal for human consumption or for optimal human health. Um, there, we do have lots of data on what the hunter gatherers were consuming, which are, we do have evidence that that was when humans were at their healthiest. It was a predominantly meat-based diet, but it wasn't 100% meat. There was no, it's like veganism. There was never a human civilization or culture that ever thrived 100% on animal foods. It's always been somewhere between 55% animal foods and say 80% animal foods. Um, so I believe that it's ideal for humans to incorporate some plant foods into the diet. And I think that there's this idea that this is a false dichotomy that's been painted uh, for the global consumer population, that you have to pick between 100% plants and 100% animal foods. You have to choose between those two. And really, the facts do not reflect that is our choice. There's a third choice, which is a meat-based omnivore diet. And
Yeah,
I can
sure.
argue effectively that that is uh, healthier than a strict meat-only diet. Before the carnivore crowd came along, was a very successful paleo community, and that paleo community has basically been covered up and forgotten by this argument between the vegans and the carnivores. Um, you know, there's different there's different kinds of carnivores out there in nature. So, you know, you've got like lions versus wolves. And a lion, for instance, requires a 100% meat based diet. You're not going to see a lion ever eating strawberries when they're wild and in season. However, wolf populations do take advantage of those nutritional sources when they're in ripe and in season. And the human digestive system much more closely resembles that of a wolf than that of a lion.
Yeah, sure. I wasn't promoting the carnivore diet or anything like that. If you got that impression, that's not what I'm.
Yeah, I wasn't
That's
sure. I wasn't sure either way, but you had mentioned carnivore several times. Uh, you know, you've got Art K, Sean Baker. Both of those are even discouraging people from eating meat in a nose to tail fashion. I think I even heard Bart K claiming that eating beef liver, for instance, is a dangerous thing to do, which is absolutely false. So, yeah, I could get into the human physiology behind why a little bit of carbohydrate is optimal for human health. But as far as, you know, uh, being painted by some dogmatic carnivore as a proponent of veganism just because I'm, you know, promoting the idea that a little bit of plant foods, if as long as it's been prepared the right way and the right sources, would be ideal. But you know, that'll be a conversation for another day.
sure. I don't disagree with that. I mean, uh, I think that the data on that says that our ancestors ate 70% meat and the rest came from plants.
Yeah,
I mean, it had to be seasonal eating.
correct.
There were a lot of berries and a lot of fruits and tubers here
Hmm.
and there when the season was ready, and then when the winter came, there was mostly meat. Um, so I think the mixed diet, uh, largely animal based, but having some plants, I don't see the problem with that. But I never promoted any specific diet on my channel. I can just give my opinion on that.
Yeah, I've heard you say that before. I've heard you um, state that you're not promoting any specific diet. I just think that it's important for the audience to realize that not everyone is buying into this false dichotomy of you have to pick one diet of 100% plants or the other diet of 100% meat. Um, there's a the chances of finding someone, like you said earlier, that was conceived, born, lived, and died on a 100% plant diet, that does not exist. And the same is true for a 100% meat diet. You're not going to find that anywhere either. And I can list lots of reasons why just an appropriate amount, which is a much smaller amount that's being consumed now, but an appropriate amount of carbohydrates is actually ideal.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it gives some energy in exercise, from what I've heard. But I'm not that much of an expert on that. I leave that to you. Um, but regarding the organ meat, yeah, sure. I think organ meat is wonderful. It's nature's multivitamin, essentially, um, but not produced in a factory. And as I've shown, it's actually very climate friendly, environmentally friendly. So, um, discouraging people from consuming organ meat, I don't really see the point in it, unless you're saying that you shouldn't over consume it, maybe you because there might be an excess of nutrition that could reach a toxic level, maybe if you're eating huge bowls of it every single day or something, because it's so nutrient packed and nutrient dense. But having it once in a while, I don't think this is a problem. I think this is a benefit. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, well, I mean, humans have been eating organs for as long as we have evidence that humans have lived, and so yeah, each animal's only got liver, for instance. You kill a big buffalo or bison that weighs 2,000 pounds, and there's a lot of fat there, a lot of meat there. Uh, you know, Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds of flesh, but only one liver. And so this idea that someone should be eating large servings of liver on every day, that is not supported by the facts. But the idea that we shouldn't be eating liver at all, well, that's just a stupid statement. Anyone that's stating that that eating any amount of liver at all is dangerous for humans, that's coming from someone that's either malicious or stupid.
Well, I'm pretty sure people who say that are having their own perspective on that. I mean, I think that I have nothing against people like Bart K or Sean Baker. I have nothing against them. I enjoy their content, but sure, there can be a healthy amount of disagreement in these sorts of spaces. You know.
Yeah, I've had issues with both of those guys. I don't really pay much attention to either one of them anymore. I know that there was a couple of studies that were carried out by the National Cattlemen's Beef Association some years back. And ironically, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, their take on cholesterol is that it's harmful for humans. And so they had done some studies trying to portray grain-fed beef as healthier than grass-fed beef because it lowered cholesterol. And I did catch Sean Baker promoting those studies and promoting the idea that grain-fed beef The guys in the study that were eating the grain-fed beef did a little bit better than the grass-fed beef based on the cholesterol issue. And I actually did get Bart K to help me debunk those studies. And then, of course, later he had Sean Baker on his channel, and the two of them kind of tried to, I think, whitewash the damage that I had done to those two studies based on, this idea of, well, we can't say that grass-fed beef is healthier than grain-fed beef because we don't have any studies right now to back that up. If those studies ever do exist, then perhaps we can make that claim. Well, that's a pretty bold claim when we know that the omegas in grass-fed beef are healthier. We know that there's higher levels of things like CLA in the grass-fed beef. What they're doing, from my perspective, is they're trying to argue that because these nutrients that we know are healthy are found in beef, that somehow because they're in beef, they wouldn't have the same health benefits that they would otherwise. That's more of a shot at beef, saying that, there's something wrong with beef because the CLA in beef for some reason might not be effective in humans. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. And of course, after I exposed the fraudulent nature of those National Cattlemen's Beef Association studies, I don't think that Sean Baker ever brought those studies up again. So what you have to remember is that the beef industry right now is they have signed on with the World Economic Forum and their anti-meat agenda. And if you look into all of these big meat packing companies, they're slowly but surely transitioning from meat corporations into protein corporations. And so they're looking at much higher margins selling plant proteins, than they would ever realize selling animal meat. So an organization like the American Cattlemen's Beef Association, you have to question everything that they say because they are corrupt. They are run by Monsanto and Bayer and McDonald's and JBS. These are corrupt organizations, and they hire professional influencers to serve as, you might call them a Trojan horse. It looks like a friend, but it's not. And I don't know 100% that either one of those guys are working for the NCBA, but I've heard a lot of the things they say that match what the NCBA would pay an influencer to say. And one of those things is, such as this claim that eating any amount of beef liver is dangerous for humans. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely stupid. It's stupidity or malice. Choose one or the other. Anyone that's saying that we should not be eating organ meats should be questioned seriously.
Regarding the grass-fed beef stuff, I also saw some research that said that grass-fed beef had higher levels of DHA, or more quality DHA or something like that. I think the research actually does exist. So I don't know why.
Yes, that research exists where these healthy compounds are in higher quantities in the grass-fed beef. What doesn't exist right now is long-term positive health outcomes of individuals that eat, and exclusively when it comes to their meats, pastured or grass-fed, regenerative meats, or organ meats. There's just no corporation out there that's funding these types of studies. But for instance, Sean Baker, what he says is, yeah, grass-fed beef has much higher levels of CLA, but we don't have any studies showing that eating a life of grass-fed beef is any better than eating a life of grain-fed beef. Those studies don't exist. So maybe, he's not saying this part, but it's implied, which is maybe the CLA in grass-fed beef isn't absorbed. It doesn't work. That's what's implied when you say that.
That's interesting. But yeah, until we have the robust health outcome, with the little research that we have there, we can infer that grass-fed beef is definitely superior nutritionally, and it's definitely better for the animals and for the environment. So just based on that, this is exactly why we need to have a holistic case when we talk about these things, and not only focus on nutrition, but also on these other aspects that are connected with that. I think this is really important. But yeah, so yeah,
The average human, I'm going to give you an example. The average human being, in order to hit their protein requirements, is going to need about 50 grams of high quality protein on a daily basis for protein purposes, so that you have protein for cellular repair, you have protein for growing new hair, new healing cuts or injuries, maintaining your skin, growing toenails and fingernails. You need about, for the average human being, and I would require more because I'm larger than average, but the average human being for protein needs would require around 50 grams. And this is not absolute, it varies per individual to some degree, but around 50 grams of protein per day. So if you're on a carnivore diet and you're consuming, say, 300 grams of meat, protein, animal protein every day, then the fact of the matter is that most of that meat is not going to be turned into hair or muscle or skin or fingernails. It's going to be excess protein, and all excess protein is going to be turned into some type of fuel, many times glucose, via the process called gluconeogenesis. So all the extra meat that one eats is turned into sugar. It's a slow sugar because gluconeogenesis doesn't raise your sugar like, drinking some type of sugary drink, but it's still going to be a source of glucose. And then that same Sean Baker, for instance, will say, look, what I think people should be doing is eating more meat. And it doesn't have to be grass-fed, because usually grass-fed beef is more expensive. There's no studies showing that the grass-fed beef is healthier long-term. So why don't people just go ahead and buy that regular supermarket grain-fed beef and eat lots of it? And so what they're doing is they're getting all their protein needs, but then they're getting all this excess protein. It's turning it into sugar via gluconeogenesis. And that's kind of like, now you get back into the calorie situation. Now what you're doing is you're trying to fulfill your calorie needs with meat. And that's like, instead of burning firewood in your fireplace, that's like going to the store and buying some nice expensive wood furniture and burning that in the fireplace, and then turning around after you've eaten all this grain-fed beef, and then saying, well, I'm not going to buy grass-fed beef because the grass-fed beef is too expensive. When what they could be doing is they could shift over to grass-fed beef, lower the amount of meat that they're eating on a daily basis, and then consume some clean, regeneratively raised starch of some kind, some type of starch or sugar in very limited amounts, so that those individuals could then afford to buy the grass-fed beef instead of the grain-fed beef. Is the grass-fed beef healthier than the grain-fed beef? I believe so. All of the ingredients say that it would be. But also, the grain-fed beef at the supermarket is being sold by the same corporations right now that are transitioning from a meat company to a protein company, and they're spearheading this fake meat industry. And that's why you see companies like McDonald's coming out with these vegan burgers. You see meat packers like JBS out of Brazil buying pea protein corporations. So they're actually, the meat companies they've signed on with the WEF's anti-meat agenda, global vegan mandate agenda, and they could at any time pull the rug out from underneath the world's populations and stop providing meat to the grocery stores. And while all of these supermarkets are selling this grain-fed beef, the local beef producers are being driven out of business because those same meat packers have a monopoly on the price that they'll pay. And so the actual producers are going bankrupt. And so they're sabotaging the meat industry on a global basis. And part of that is being paid for by those carnivores that are going to the supermarket and buying large amounts of grain-fed beef instead of smaller amounts of grass-fed beef and a little bit of clean starch, like maybe an organic new potato, like maybe 10 grams or 20 grams of carbohydrate over the course of the day. In a 1 meal per day OMAD fashion. But anyone that look into it. Go to your Google, type in meat packers, start plant-based meat company, something like that. You'll see that these meat packers that are supplying the supermarket meat, that regular grain-fed supermarket beef, for instance, these are some of the companies that are spearheading veganism. As crazy as it sounds.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that until I watched some of your videos. This is very malicious, that mainstream meat companies are actually also on a plant-based train, so to speak. So people need to watch out for that, because you're actually supporting veganism by buying this stuff from JBS and the affiliated with the World Economic Forum type companies. It's veganism through the back door, essentially. And what I also find interesting is that the transition to protein companies, what you mentioned there, a lot of this is also driven by these companies trying to monopolize the protein in a way that is copyrighted, or to have a license on it. Basically, the protein sequence, they want to have a copyright on that. Have you heard about that? Basically, intellectual property rights
On the genetic sequences that they're splicing in. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, pretty much. In a similar way, Monsanto does a similar thing with the seeds, I think. So you can only use Monsanto seeds. They have they have some organization that I forgot the specific name of the organization, but in a third world, they have pushed this that farmers can only use certain genetically GMO seeds, and not other seeds, and uh, because they have some kind of copyright or intellectual property rights on those seeds, and
Yeah.
they're using that same principle now for the fake meat, for the cell cultured meat, basically, to monopolize the market.
Yeah, these are patented gene sequences. So anything that they splice that gene sequence into, they now have a patent on that organism. And so what they'll do, this is one of the ways that they've kind of wiped out a lot of the organic crop farmers is, let's say you're an organic crop farmer and you don't deal with Monsanto. However, you have a neighbor to your east and another neighbor to your west, and both of them are crop farmers as well, growing the same crop that you're growing, but they're using that patented gene sequence. And so, because of wind and rain drift, you get seeds with these patented gene sequences that end up on the organic farmer's property. And then Monsanto will send some of their criminal investigators over there, climb the fence, trespass on another farmer's property, gather up, steal some of his produce, take it back to the lab and prove that this organic farmer that's never paid Monsanto a dime is growing their patented gene sequence over there, turn around, sue that organic farmer. Now the farmer's got all of these legal bills and ends up having to sell the farm just to pay the attorneys. And then next year, one of his neighbors buys them out, and now the entire region is not organic, but growing these patented seeds. So yeah, that is real. It is happening, and it's one of the ways that they're getting rid of their competition.
Yeah, but getting rid of the competition is the modus operandi of veganism. Everything has to be monopolized, essentially. This is what um, this is what veganism is all about. Get rid of other food sources, get rid of self-sufficiency, monopolize everything, privatize the land, or have it taken over by some corporation or some government. Um, you know, le- it, what veganism's um, what vegan propaganda is also pushing a lot of time. What I've noticed is that they demonize eating locally. They say, "Oh, it doesn't matter that you for your emissions or for anything like that. Eating local, it doesn't matter. What matters is what kind of food." I see this theme running very often in vegan propaganda and vegan propaganda studies. Oh, eating local is not important. Um, this is exactly the reason they want to have a less localized, less decentralized uh, food system and more centralization, more monopolization of the food system. Forcing people off their land, ex- expropriating people off their land. In many countries, pastoralists are driven out of their land in concert with big corporations. Governments do that in concert with big corporations, like the ones we have discussed. Um, so this is really colonialism. Um, this is really a type of food fascism that we are experiencing in Germany recently they have um, pulled the rug off the feet under. How do you say that in English? Pull. They basically don't subsidize the farmers anymore in Germany, or they're cutting into the subsidies of the farmers. Um, so they're ruining the farmers here, and there are huge protests because of that. And they're saying, "Oh, this is because we have to mind the budget, mind the state budget. But when it comes to other stuff, financing war, then they have the money."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, their priorities are all messed up. Now, I just want to quickly give you an example of what I was talking about a little bit earlier. Here's an article showing, and this was back in 2019. It's even gotten worse. We had COVID uh, monies that were supposed to go to the farmers, the meat farmers here in the United States. JBS, a foreign company, is getting most of that money, right? And so you've got farmers going bankrupt because their businesses were shut down for too long, just like a lot of other businesses. And then turn around and look at this. You got, and remember that when a carnivore influencer tells you that don't bother buying local grass fed, just go to the grocery store and buy some of that cheaper grain fed beef at the supermarket. Well, that's going to be supplied by JBS. JBS has received billions of dollars in subsidies that was supposed to go to the farmers. But instead of going to the farmers, it goes to the meat packers. And then what does JBS do? Is they turn around and they enter the plant-based market. And so you've got companies like JBS that are receiving financial aid that was supposed to go to cattlemen, but instead they gave it to JBS. JBS turns around and starts helping to spearhead the plant-based meat, fake meat market, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
as soon as a meat packer does something like this, that should disqualify them from ever getting any subsidies that should be going to any type of meat industry.
yeah, absolutely. That's how the world works. I mean, during the pandemic, the richest corporations around the world were just increasing their profits tremendously. I mean, this was really a windfall on their profits. Like, um, you can read in many newspapers how insanely rich the richest people got richer during the pandemic, and how many small people got out of business. This got really to an extreme point. And a lot of these government subsidies has gone not to the small guy, but to the corporations and through to Wall Street. And Wall Street has ownership in all these in these companies like Bayer, Monsanto, JBS, and all these other companies. Um, this is ultimately where veganism is coming from. Let's be real here. But yeah, what you are uncovering, that even in the carnivore community or the pro meat community, there's this hidden veganism hovering in there, is very concerning. Definitely, it's good that you raise awareness about that.
Yeah, well, like we said earlier, is that the disco ball of chaos has many facets to it, and all of those facets or issues need to be exposed, and people need to know about them. Both people from those few sincere individuals that are in the vegan community, and those individuals that are in the carnivore community, and those individuals that are eating the standard plant-based garbage diet. Everyone needs to realize that our food, the machine that delivers our nutrition, is under attack.
Yes, exactly. There are some good people in all of these communities, and veganism is kind of driving a wedge between people, and um, is basically saying that one group of people is moral and the other one is immoral, and is um, has to be demonized, and they are the enemies and all of that. So this all has also negative social consequences. Um, but back to some of the organizations that push this kind of agenda. Have you heard about an organization called Open Philanthropy?
No.
This is actually a very interesting organization that also pushes veganism, and this organization was founded by the co-founder of Facebook, um, and this organization funds many animal rights organizations and vegan propaganda outlets, media outlets, such as Sentient Media, for example. Um, and but what they also fund is alternative proteins and uh, plant-based protein and all of that. So the same organization funds animal rights organization, but also being investors and giving grants to alternative proteins. And the the, the founder of this is also invested in plant-based fast food and all of that. So I just think that this is an organization, Open Philanthropy is an organization that should be investigated more and put more attention to that organization, because they also fund, for example, the Guardian, and the Guardian is very pro vegan and against animal agriculture. Um,
Yeah.
there are many. There's not just the World Economic Forum, but there are many sub organizations that many people don't know about, and that are connected to the World Economic Forum or indirectly connected. There's also the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and they have a paper uh, that basically lays out some techniques to push plant-based diets, some how you can influence customers and how you can influence governments and things like that. So you can clearly see in their own documents how these organizations actually want this, and how they're tied in with big corporations, with the petroleum industry, um, which is logical, because a lot of these agrochemicals are made from petroleum. So
Yeah. Just like the supplements that the vegans rely upon.
yeah, yeah,
Many of them are they use petroleum not only to fuel the process, but as raw material to manufacture it from, And so the vegan, once you tell them, explain that the plant-based diet is deficient in these nutrients, and they just say, oh, well, You just take a supplement. And then you say, well, how do they make these supplements? Oh, they make them in a lab. And so they've got this idea that there are these laboratory these lab techs running around in white coats, with a beaker, you know, mixing unicorn farts together to make B12. And that's not how it works. You've got to have gargantuan amounts of coal and oil and natural gas emitting methane and causing all kinds of pollution and environmental degradation and ecological collapse. But they're so infantilized that they don't bother looking that deep into it.
Yes, yes, and a lot of these supplements are also sometimes they're not even containing the nutrients that they that they put the label on, because it's not very well regulated. It's not a very well regulated industry, the supplement
Yeah,
industry.
yeah,
But the vegans tell you you have to rely on that to survive. I mean, this is very irresponsible.
yeah. That's a very Orwellian system that they're suggesting that we be shackled to, where some corporation within some unregulated industry gets to dictate whether or not we get, our essential nutrients this week. And not only that, most of these nutrients that they're manufacturing are not bioidentical to the real nutrient, and they do not have the same effect on human biology. So they're dangerously ignorant in most cases and dangerously malicious in some.
Yes. I'm definitely also gonna make a video on supplements at some point, because I had a conversation with Michael McCaffrey under one of your videos about supplements, and I asked him how many supplements do you think is required on a vegan diet, and he basically said that um, basically five supplements, but you can just take two, and one has to be a multivitamin, and the other one has to be vitamin B12. But what if the multivitamin is not working the way that it should? What are you then doing? So, I mean, he basically admitted that you have to take at least five supplements. This is crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. And beyond that, how dare he support mandating that we all have to rely upon some company to give us these supplements that he believes in? He's not smart enough to know that he may be setting some child up for death, or setting some would-be parent up for having a child with a birth defect. How the hell dare he get behind mandating that people eat a diet that's plant-based and proven to be deficient and reliant upon pills, when he doesn't know enough about human nutrition to guarantee that there's not going to be some baby out there born with spina bifida because of his nutritional recommendations. He can stick his nutritional advice up his ass.
Well, he doesn't even understand what a randomized control trial is, which is very funny. All these vegans think they're like experts on everything, experts in nutrition and experts in environmental science or whatever. And they go with this very arrogant attitude. Oh, uh, actually, this and that. Oh, don't you understand? The cow eats more plants, blah, blah, blah. They go with this very arrogant attitude, like you're some country bumpkin that doesn't understand anything.
Yeah.
Um, you can just use chronometer and l- uh, monitor all your nutrient requirements, and you can just use an app, and you know, amazing, right?
Yeah. 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 The chronometer doesn't measure anti-nutrients, does it? It doesn't measure the bioavailability of it. It doesn't measure whether or not it's even bioactive, because some nutrients can be bioavailable, but if they're not bioactive, then they don't work even if they make it into the bloodstream. So yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, but calories though, you need your heat units.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
bioavailability doesn't matter one bit to vegans. You know, they think that calories is all that matters, and taking some pills. I think this is actually very dangerous that YouTube lets these people run loose on the internet, giving out false medical information. This is potentially dangerous. Imagine a lot of young people watch this type of content, and then they get sucked into veganism, and they end up in hospital. You know, so and they say, "Oh, this doesn't happen very often." The vegans say, "Oh, or omnivores do it too," or anything like that.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, in Belgium, there were reports of doctors from many hospitals saying that hospitals are flooded with babies that were put on a vegan diet and
Hmm.
that have deficiencies and that are sick because of the vegan diet.
Yeah. Yeah. I think maybe what needs to happen is someone like, find the biggest influencer out there, levy a class action lawsuit against someone who's a celebrity vegan influencer out there who's telling lies and half truths about optimal human nutrition.
Oh
And
yeah,
let's
definitely.
yeah, start dealing with them in the courtroom and
The, the,
see how they like that. And don't just stop with them. Name them in the class action suit, but also go ahead and name Monsanto, Bayer Monsanto, uh, all of these plant-based mock meat providers, and even government bodies that are kowtowing to this corporate influence and trying to sell the public a bill of goods that was, bullshit manufactured by these corporations that have nothing but profit and control in mind.
yeah, I think that a lot of ex-vegans should just get together and just send out the lawsuits. This should happen at some point, and it probably will happen at some point. I can definitely see that in the future. A lot of vegan influencers that you see now on YouTube, they will receive letters from lawyers at some point.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
think about how recklessly they're just giving out advice and saying, "Oh, this is healthy, this is unhealthy," um, which is not factual and which is very risky. Vegans in general are just very reckless people that just want to abolish an entire industry. Even,
without
even,
considering things like
yeah,
food security.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Just this. Even if there are some reasonable criticisms of animal agriculture, this doesn't mean that we should just abolish the whole industry of animal agriculture just because there are some things that need to be improved, which is the case. There are some things that need to be improved, of course, but this doesn't mean that we can just abolish it. The difference between us and vegans is that while we criticize crop agriculture, we don't want to abolish crop agriculture, you know. And this
Right.
is really the difference here.
We want it reformed. We want it rehabilitated, but we don't advocate for its abolishment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This is one of the fundamental differences between us and vegans, where we can actually see who has the more reasonable approach here. And the vegans might be saying, "Oh, but the animal agriculture is so it kills the planet or anything like that." But a lot of these claims are based on falsehoods, as we have talked about. And but at some point they say, "Oh, but what about antibiotical resistance?"
Mhm.
But that is actually antibiotics use is actually declining worldwide in animal agriculture, and in the EU, the animal agriculture actually uses less antibiotics than humans do, and antibiotic use and antibiotic resistance is also a problem in the crop agriculture, which nobody really talks about. Um, so they have to also point their fingers at themselves.
Yeah, a lot of that just comes from ignorance on their part. But unfortunately, when you try to correct that ignorance for them, they'll look away and they'll put blinders on. They don't want to know the full truth about how the vegan menu comes about. They just want to believe this fairy tale that it's cruelty free, it's healthy, and it's good for the environment. Um, it's really anyone that's watching. If you haven't seen the documentary King Corn, great documentary to show the power of the corn industry. And you know these industries like the grain industry, the legume industry, the pesticide industries, um, generally the agrochemical industry. These are some of the most powerful industries in the world, and they know what they're doing to human health. They know what they're doing to the global ecology, and they've taken all of the things that they're doing wrong and they're attributing that to animal agriculture. And it's a giant lie. And it's one of the foundational pillars of uh, you know what's behind this push for veganism, because they want to they're proactive, they're preempting the public, figuring out that it's mainstream crop agriculture that's causing all of this animal death and suffering, ecological ruin, environmental havoc. And so they preempt us figuring that out and go ahead and plant these seeds to make people think that it's animal agriculture that's responsible for that. The problem for mainstream carnivory is that, for instance, you're eating regular supermarket beef that's grain fed. Well, there is a buy in there to veganism, because you're now eating flesh that's tainted with pesticides. It's tainted with excess inflammatory omega 6s. It's propping up the mainstream crop agriculture that is actually causing all of this death and destruction. And also, you're paying money to these big meat companies that are helping to spearhead the plant-based meat industry. Meanwhile, the regular farmers, they don't, the animal farmers, the livestock farmers, they have absolutely no interest in promoting veganism, and they have no direct buy-in to crop agriculture, especially when they're someone like me or Joel Salatin or Greg Judy, someone that's out there doing regenerative rotational grazing management, you know, trying to sequester carbon back into the soil, staying away from antibiotics, not shooting up our animals with all types of vaccines and crap that ends up in the consumer's biology. Those of us that are trying to do it the right way, we're not getting any of this subsidy. We're not getting any airtime in mainstream media. Politicians aren't talking about it. If you talk to a vegan, they won't. The last thing they want to talk about is regenerative, ag. They just want everything to be synthetic in a vertical farm, and here's your pills. And so, yeah, it's going to be up to the people, the consumers themselves, to finally wake up to what's going on and correcting it, because they could correct it. It's just that they're getting their information from the wrong source. That's it.
Right. And also what you said about regenerative agriculture. The vegans are saying that this uses too much land or anything like that. Meanwhile, the land is occupied by their monocrops. So if we just reduce that, we can repasture that land and use it for regenerative grazing, produce more high quality food there, and it's better for the planet. So less, so the land use is not the issue actually.
No, not at all. Not at all. The only time land use is really an issue is when you're talking about the mainstream factory crop farming or the mainstream phosphate mining. Go to these fertilizer mines and see what they've done to the land. They leave it in complete ruin where nothing can live on it after that. Whereas when you're raising livestock in a regenerative fashion on any amount of acreage, that's the best use for that land. There is no better use for that land.
Yeah, it's very efficient. Um, yeah, and again, there's no vegan scenario without phosphate mining or without petroleum. So vegans can ignore that issue all they want, but at the end of the day, they have to reconcile with the fact that this is a finite resource. Phosphate is a finite resource, petroleum is a finite resource, topsoil is a finite resource.
Mm-hmm.
It's this, and I never see any of these pro-vegan environmental studies pointing this out or factoring this in. This is very weird. They always say, "Oh, vegan diet causes less emissions, less land use, and all of that." All these, wonderful things, but they never point out how it's actually reliant on phosphate mining and petroleum, which is a finite resource, which runs out eventually.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which would cause a global famine, which points back to what you mentioned earlier, is the misanthropic nature of veganism.
yeah. Also, one last thing, what I want to talk about is that a lot of vegans actually cheat. A lot of vegans are actually eating animal foods behind closed doors when nobody's watching. And there's some survey that came out some time ago, recently actually. I don't know how accurate this is, but it's titled "Many Vegetarians and Vegans Do Eat Animal Products." Um, and it says that over 50% of vegans eat dairy and eggs. I think this had like 1,600 participants or anything like that. And the vegans in that survey, they were admitting that they sometimes eat some eggs or some dairy products. Um, now, again, I don't know how accurate this is or how randomized the participant sample is, but this is basically in line with some other research that I did. I also have a video on that, how there are a lot of vegans and vegetarians who basically cheat and incorporate animal products. And I think this is very unethical, actually, to promote this diet as, oh, you can live 100% on plants, but I, the person who promotes this, secretly eat animal products, and then you're setting other people up for failure, for health failure.
Yeah.
This is extremely unethical, actually. Or some other people who say, oh, we're vegan, but we're actually eating oysters and
Yeah.
clams. And
Yeah. That's like reasonable vegan. He was someone had challenged him to go get a B12 test, but he did it after he ate a bunch of bivalves, right? And he even
yeah,
admitted to the bivalve consumption, and then turn around and make the claim, see, a vegan diet does provide plenty of B12, right?
yeah, and bivalves are actually sentient, and I mean there's some emerging evidence that eating bivalves is actually not vegan and they're actually sentient. So there are even some vegan anthropologists who point out that eating this is actually not vegan. So
Well, yeah, it's it shouldn't be considered vegan. I think that most vegans don't consider it vegan, but those few that do, if they were to ever sit down and do the math, what if the entire world had to rely upon bivalves for their B12? Well, now you've got another ecological disaster on your hands, because that would absolutely wipe out, the world's bivalves. There would be nothing left. So just more infantilism, this childish thinking, not thinking the things through, not thinking deep and wide about the subject, just basing all of their positions on emotions, and that's it.
yes. Um yeah, I think that we pretty much talked about everything today. I think, do you have something to add, or because I've I'm run I ran out of subject to talk about, really.
No, I think that we can. We will. You and I will get together uh, behind the scenes, schedule our next live stream. We'll do a reaction video to the video that you mentioned. Uh,
Yeah,
next,
by debug the brain, I think.
yeah, yeah. So let's go ahead and wrap it up for today, and thank everyone for coming. Appreciate your support. I appreciate Anti-War Mindset for coming today. I really, again, want to thank you for picking up the baton and helping me fight for the people. And so happy to have you on the team. I think you're a great asset. And I look forward to debunking more vegan lies with you in the
Yeah,
future.
thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, let's say goodnight, and hope to see everyone back here on the next one. Sound good?
Good night.
Good night. Love you all. Thanks for coming. See you next